You ready? All right. Today is, what's today? September 1, 2021. And I am calling the City Commission regular meeting to order. Mr. Wiley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
And Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Here.
Frank is absent today.
Yes. Commissioner O'Donnell is out this evening. All right, so will you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. For those of you that are in here, if you're in the back of the room, just kind of wave at me if you can't hear me. I can hear myself now that I took my mask off, and I'm trying to make sure you all can hear me. All right, so looking at the agenda, we do not have any ceremonies and proclamations. We do have some citizen comments. I know we have probably quite a few people here about our public hearing. I guess the only comment and guidance I'll give you at this point is if you would like to comment about the planning department or complaints or the process about the appeal, that you can provide those in general comment. When we get to the appeal, those comments have to be just about the appeal. So if you're commenting during the appeal about the planning department or the process or timing and stuff like that, now is the time for you to make those complaints, or you can bring those to us in another meeting. So we're just trying to be really clear about what's allowed during the appeal process, and just making sure you understand that now is a good time if you want to provide just general comments about the process and specifics about the appeal need to happen during that agenda item once we get there. So I do have a couple of comment cards. So starting off, I have Ms. Carla Laws. And then after that, we'll have Bob LaSalle. So Bob, if you want to start making your way up. Hi, Ms. Laws, can you state your name and city for the record?
My name is Carla Laws, and I live in Oregon City.
Go ahead.
I wanted to speak tonight concerning some general issues. Number one, as of today, the posting for a land use particularly did not have the city recorder's correct number on there to make prior reservations, which is very concerning. Among all my other issues concerning lack of due process for Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association in general, posting land use behind bushes initially, which is, I think, the city's responsibility, not getting back to the residents not getting postcards, the residents not getting postings that still 2/3 of the residents probably don't know about a development coming into play in our neighborhood. The neighborhood association, you know, it just more and more experience. Like, I'm getting emails the past few days on things that I should have known a while ago that were dated way in advance that I'm not getting or notified on until the past 2 days, 48 hours as a neighborhood chair. It's very concerning. The other issue I have is technically, I don't know if you're all aware, I get concerned about the city misquoting particular groups definitely based on an ethnicity, on where they stand on something, and possibly not even having the endorsement to be able to actually provide a real letter that it's been documented and logged. It's very concerning to me, especially a person myself, a person of color misrepresenting a group or an actual ethnicity. It's very, very concerning. For me, that I have had a lot of limitations to be able to help my neighborhood properly, getting the correct information, and I feel that our city operations is not advocating for Barclay Hills residents. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Laws. Mr. Bob LaSalle, your name and city of residence for the record.
My name is Bob LaSalle. I live in Oregon City, and I'm speaking as the chair of the Citizens Involvement Committee. On August 3rd, our last meeting, this letter I'm going to read to you was approved by the majority of the Citizens Involvement Committee, and I'm obligated to pass this on to you as the chair. Dear Mayor and City Commissioners, we as the Citizen Involvement Committee are dedicated to our role as liaisons between city government and the citizens of Oregon City. We take seriously our task to communicate and advise the City Commission on issues surrounding the community and on land use decision-making for Oregon City. As such, we are reaching out to you to address a concern that is impacting our community. We ask that you expediently investigate the practices, both written and non-written, of the Community Development Department regarding land use. Considering recent events at commission meetings and in the news, it is evident that policies are in place that we as citizens and you as leaders are unaware of. We thank you for your service to the community and appreciate the hours of work you volunteer. With gratitude and hope, signed Bob LaSalle, CIC Chair. And I'll pass this on to Jacob with a copy for the record and a copy for each of the mayor and each of the commissioners. I have to leave to take care of my ill wife. I'd like to just make one comment, kind of out of order, but I think that the issue with the Berkeley Hills appeal, the developers have submitted over 600 pages of information for the commission to consider. And I think that's a little bit overkill in a way that the neighborhood association would be able to afford that kind of attorney's fees to put something together like that. Thank you.
Mr. LaSalle, before you leave, did the CIC talk specifically about, or do you have any specifics of what you're asking us to look into about the Community Development Department, or just the land use process, similar to what Ms. Laws was stating earlier? Is that kind of what you're asking about, just transparency in the processes?
I asked for more specifics when the committee was putting this letter together, and they were reluctant to give me any more specifics, just a general desire to have the department policies looked into. One in particular, the first one that comes to life or mind was Ms. Turway's communication to the developers in regard to the action that the city commission is soon to take, warning the
Right.
developers of that action. That's the one that first comes to my mind.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaSalle. All right. Next, we have Catherine Pieselwitz.
Good job on that name.
And I was wondering if I was going to get it right. Can you please state your name probably more correctly than I did and your city of residence for the record?
My name is Catherine Pieselwitz. I am a resident of Oregon City. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners, for allowing me to speak. I would like to address some history for you. This is history of my personal run-ins, for lack of a better word, with the Community Development Department / planning. I moved to Oregon City in 2004. I rented a townhouse in the complex that is now called Tuscany Villa, didn't have a name at the time. I rented one of the townhouses. That complex has 16 townhouses on one side and twice as many apartments on the other side. The complex runs from Holmes Lane to Mountain View. The address is 581 Holmes Lane, but it connects to both streets. After I had established residency there, Maggie Place was put in. Maggie Place is at the corner of Mountain View and Cedar Lane, which is catty corner from that development. I mean, it's right there. No one in my complex that I spoke with at the time, and I had gotten acquainted with a lot of my neighbors, knew anything about that development until construction started. That's when we found out that that property was being developed, multifamily development, also a new street put in there, Maggie Place. There was no street there at the time. Cedar Lane is actually a county easement, although the city shows it as a road on their map. When the development went in, the developer had to widen that road, that passage, and put curbs all along. So that's when the curbs went in that go from Cedar Lane up Mountain View to Malala. They finished that curbing. Prior to that, there was a very short area of curb. On the other side of Mountain View, there wasn't any sidewalk or curb, both sidewalk and curb. There wasn't a sidewalk and curb until the Public Works Department decided that area around the water tank, they were going to use that for storage. So they cleared out the grass, they planted asphalt, they store a lot of their trucks and stuff in there, et cetera.
Ms. Piesowitz, you're out of time. You only have 3 minutes.
All right.
Can you say like one sentence of wrapping up?
We didn't know about it. Then in 2008, by that time, I'd met my husband. We bought a home, and we bought a home on Cedar Lane. We received a letter in the mail inviting us to a July 7th, 2008 meeting at the planning office to discuss a gravity-fed sewer line on Mountain View. The letter was sent from JSR Investments, LLC. The address on this letter is 710 Cedar Lane. That's our home. I found no record of this business in Oregon, and nothing showed they'd ever had any doing with living where we live, okay?
So you're out of time. I would encourage you to follow up with staff, or if you have something that you can
Okay.
leave with us, you can.
There were 4 lots of Mountain View that they wanted to develop. That's what it boiled down to. And it was all looked like a done deed. Pete Walker with the planning department, well, he was community development director at the time, he led the meeting. He gave us details on where the sewer line would go. The developers were there. They had schematics, drafted. It was like it was all a done deed. And the caveat was we would have to pay for it, the homeowners. Okay, no notification. We had a notification. We
Ms.
did
Piesowitz,
receive it.
you're out of time, I'm sorry. You only have 3 minutes and you've
All
gone
right.
way over.
All right. Well, it's just this history. It goes on and on. And I've approached trying to change zoning, stonewalled. I'm really had it with, I don't know. I would like to see that department investigated.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Jacob, do we have any other public comment? Or citizen comment? None? Okay. All right, I think we're ready to move on in the agenda. We don't have any presentations, but we do have the adoption of the agenda. And this is where we will tackle anything that's on the consent agenda. Commissioner Morrow, I believe do you have an item to pull?
Yeah, I would like to pull the minutes of the Tuesday, August 10th meeting for discussion, just for a slight edit that has been made.
Okay, Commissioner Smith, I thought I saw your hand in your video.
No, I have nothing.
Okay. Commissioner McGriff?
No, I'd just like to move the remainder of the consent agenda be approved.
Second.
All right.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor,
Oh,
did we
wait.
skip adoption of the agenda?
Yes.
Well, we're doing that right now, so.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Conkle, you have something to add to the agenda as well, right?
Yes, I would request that the commission consider adding under general business, a new item brought forward tonight, Oregon City ballot measure language, water rates, revisions ordered by Judge Wenzel in response to appeal filed September 1st that was addressed on September 1st, 2021.
All right, so that item is time sensitive, so we're going to scoot that in general business up in front of 9A, which is currently on there because 9A is not time sensitive at this point in time. And then Commissioner Morrow, we will try to get to our guidelines is anything we pull off the consent goes to general business. So I think we can take care of that really quickly as well. So we'll move that in the general business area in front of 9A and take care of those quick items before the end of this evening. And with that, we have a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda, and then we would need an additional motion regarding this change of these rearranging of the adoption.
I'll do that after.
Okay.
Take the roll call.
Jacob?
So just to be clear, we're voting on the consent agenda at this
Yeah.
time?
We are. We kind of put consent agenda changes and adoption of the agenda together. So the initial motion is on the approval of the remaining consent agenda items, and it's been made and seconded by Commissioner Smith. Okay.
Commissioner Denise McGriff?
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl?
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. We need a motion on the new
I'd like to move
agenda.
that we add 2 items to the agenda, or the adoption of the agenda regarding water rates resolution and review of the minutes of August 10th, 2021.
Okay.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Wiley?
Commissioner Denise McGriff?
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl?
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so that takes care of the agenda. So we're going to start off our public hearings tonight. This is a long and complicated one. So I know we have quite a number of folks in the audience that are here to participate. So I am going to begin by opening the public hearing, AP 21-0004 and AP 21-0005. These are 2 appeals of planning files regarding a lot line adjustment and site plan and design review for a 60-unit residential condominium project on Holmes Lane. So we have a couple of pieces and we are dealing with them together, but we need to be strategic in how we deal with them. So I'll start out with Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. Carrie Richter, Deputy City Attorney, will walk us through some legal issues.
Okay, and in the future, when you're talking, we can't hardly hear you, so you're going to have to remove your mask like I'm doing. It's very difficult. Ms. Richter.
Thank you. A public hearing to consider 2 land use appeals relating to a singular decision is scheduled tonight. A staff report has been prepared and has been made available to the public 7 days before tonight's hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each appeal. Staff has analyzed the criteria along with the appeal documents, written comments, and input received through the public notification process. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is generally set out in state law and the Oregon Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown in the chart right here. We're going to follow that generally with a little deviation given the number of issues that the commission has to address tonight. As an appeal hearing, individuals who will be allowed to testify are those who submitted written testimony during staff's review of the proceeding below. Anyone who did submit written testimony who wishes to speak in this appeal should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and whether you reside or have a business within the city. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the issues raised in the notice of appeal and is limited to the evidence presented below. No new evidence shall be considered on this appeal. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, you must identify and discuss those criteria and explain why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any party who submitted written materials below during the proceeding may submit written materials as part of this review, so long as it does not include new evidence and while the public record is open. Any qualifying written materials mailed to city staff during the time period which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to city staff with the request that it be presented to the city commission in order to become part of the record. This includes PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in oral testimony. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional testimony must make that request before the public testimony portion of this hearing is closed. If the city commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the commission's consideration. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements so that all parties can respond, the issue will not be adjudged appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, Oregon Revised Statute 197796 requires us to announce the following: the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The mayor already opened the public hearing, so I won't read that again. But I will say that this is a quasi-judicial review, meaning that the parties have a right to a decision where the decision makers are unbiased, have no conflicts of interest, and are free of any ex parte contacts or other evidence that was obtained outside the public hearing, such as a site visit. As a result, I'm going to call on each of you individually and ask that you disclose any conflict of interest, bias, or ex parte contacts or visits to the site. Commissioner Morrow.
No biases or conflicts of interest. I was on the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association Facebook page, although I do not reside in the neighborhood, but I was removed from that page in anticipation, so I'm not privy to any of the discussions that were had on that page regarding this issue.
So you did not read any Facebook posts about this application?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, I do not have any conflicts of interest or bias. However, I want to report for the record that I have been a member of the McLaughlin Memorial Association since 1989. They are the owners of the property across the street from this development, known as the William L. Holmes House, National Register property, 1847. I am a regular volunteer there. I also want to report for the record that I am a former colleague and friend of one of the property owners. I've known her for over 25 years, but we have not discussed this issue. And I'm also very familiar with most of the people in this room because I was the representative to the CIC, so I know all the neighborhood chairs and am familiar with them in terms of my work with the City Commission and my work prior to being on the City Commission. It's a small town, we know lots of people.
Thank you. Oh, Ms. Turway is asking me about the the McLaughlin Neighborhood Memorial
McLaughlin
Association.
Memorial Association.
Yes.
What about it?
Are you involved, engaged with them?
I have been a member of that association since 1989. I have been a past president of that organization. I have been a treasurer of that organization. I am currently on the board of trustees of that organization. I am also a member of the Rose Farm Management Committee, which was established by Mrs. Ruth McBride Powers. I am currently the treasurer for that organization. I volunteer at the Rose Farm. I'm there a lot, all the time, pretty much.
Have you engaged with the Memorial Association with respect to this application?
I advised the president that she should respond to this and submit comments according to the city's criteria, which I pointed out to her in the Oregon City Municipal Code, and that is as much as I have discussed it with her.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Commissioner Rockysmith.
I have no conflicts of interest and no bias. I did receive several email chains regarding this topic that did not go to the rest of the commission. They were email chains from Carla Laws between staff, and I forwarded those to our city manager for the record, but that is it. And I did not respond to the email chains.
The two emails Commissioner Smith forwarded me dated June 4th, 2021 from Ms. Laws concerning the comment deadlines, and an email dated 8/16/21 from Ms. Laws concerning postcard mailings, and those have been forwarded to the Assistant City Recorder.
Thank you. And Mayor Lyle-Smith.
Yes, so I do not have any official conflict of interest nor bias. I have driven down Holmes Lane. I live here and I use Holmes Lane, so I know the area that we're talking about, and I think I purchased the desk from a lady who lives right next door in that area. So yes, I've definitely been near this location. Regarding contacts, I've seen a lot of emails on this between the neighborhood association, people in the neighborhood association, a lot about the process. We heard a lot of those comments tonight, and this starts way back from the original public comment period, just trying to understand the process. And usually and on those emails, I was CC'd on them so that I was aware that the neighborhood was feeling like they were being challenged with the process, that it wasn't transparent. They felt like they were jumping through hoops, and I believe all of those emails, like I said, were sent to city staff. And so similar to what Commissioner Smith said, a lot of that, of course, they were all also woven stuff about the application at that point, and I had not read any information. I couldn't tell you anything about the application, and it was more of a mere watching the exchange. I also received phone calls about the doors being locked at the planning department. I talked to City Manager Tony Conkle about this. That was on our website, the contact hours versus what it said at the top of the page. We had people trying to go down to the planning department. I saw that request to calm down. They came down, the doors were locked, so you could see there was frustration. So yes, people were reaching out to me because they saw that the process was generally, they felt non-transparent and difficult. And so I was being included so that I knew of that. Issues with time stamping. they called and asked, can they go to City Hall? So I ended up being kind of a conduit of people trying to jump through the hoops and figure out the process. And if I didn't know, I would call the city manager and say, what does it say why is there 2 different times on our website? Why is the door locked when they were told they could come down? Can they go to City Hall? Can they get time stamped at City Hall? So that's the kind of stuff that I focused my attention on in these emails. I feel like I can make a biased or an unbiased decision, just because I feel like the role that I'm in, I become the point person of problems that are happening in the city. And so I've seen a lot of those exchanges, probably more than what some of the other commissioners have seen. So I guess I'll take this moment to say I think we have some process discussions to talk about after this is over. But is there any other questions? I'm trying to think if there's anything else to say on that.
I would just want to confirm that you feel like you can make a decision based on the criteria and the application materials that have been provided in the agenda packet and not challenges that the neighborhood has had with respect to process.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Does anyone in the audience wish to question the commissioners about these disclosures?
You have to come up if you want to.
Can't talk from there.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Lyle Smith. I don't plan on challenging anybody's ability to make an unbiased decision tonight, but I do have some follow-up.
Can you state your name?
Who are you?
Oh, Garrett Stevenson, attorney for the applicant.
Okay.
Schwabe Williamson and Wyatt, my apologies. What I'd like to do is ask some follow-up questions of Commissioner McGriff about her involvement with the McLaughlin Memorial Association. And the reason why I need to ask these questions is that the McLaughlin Memorial Association wrote a letter June 1 objecting to the application. And I understand, and with your indulgence, Mayor Lyle Smith, I'd like to address Commissioner McGriff directly, if that's all right.
Sure. As long as that's all right by our attorney, so,
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioner McGriff. Once again, Garrett Stevenson. So I wanted to just ask you a few more follow-up questions before we proceed on your involvement with the McLaughlin Memorial Association. You say you're on their board of directors or board of trustees, is that right?
Yes, I've been on the board of trustees since 1989.
Okay. And were you aware that the association was preparing a letter in opposition to the project?
I was asked by the president whether they should comment, and I advised her, yes, they should.
Okay. And did you explain anything to the president about how to comment?
I explained to the president what the process is. She is not a land use planner, as I am, as you are aware, since we know each other. I explained to her when she needed to get it in, she'd receive the notice, and she's not familiar with that process. So I explained it from that standpoint and strongly suggested that if the association had any concerns about the impact of the development on the property, that they should respond.
Did the association discuss with you any of the concerns specifically?
No.
Did you advise them at all on any of the code criteria that they need to address?
I referred the president to the notice, which specified the code in the notice application, the notice that was given. I had seen a copy of it myself, and she asked me about that, and I said, yes, this is the criteria that you need to look at. This is what you need to refer to, and anything else that you feel might be pertinent.
Okay. Did you see the letter before it went in?
No, I did not.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you.
I saw it after.
Okay. Any other questions?
If you need further clarification, as I stated, my official roles with the association are my past officer positions, also with the Rose Farm Management Committee. And I'm basically, what I do there is I'm sort of a gopher. I paint, I prep, I weed, I do maintenance, I move furniture. you name it, we have projects that need to be done, that's what I do. And I'm probably there half a dozen times, in a week. And I use Holmes Lane because that's the easiest way for me to get there, so.
Thank you. I appreciate all of the comments. I think what's next is the staff report on the jurisdictional issues. Do you want me to go ahead and proceed with that, or do you want to say something?
Yes, you may proceed whichever one. I have staff report is next.
Okay, so we've broken this hearing down into a couple of steps because we have some procedural issues, jurisdictional issues that relate to the appeal itself. And so we'd like to have a staff report that covers the jurisdictional issues, let the parties testify, and then have the commission make an interlocutory decision with respect to the jurisdictional issues. And then we'll move into the merits of the appeal. So with your indulgence, I will quickly run through a staff report presenting those, if I can know how these 87 buttons work. So there are two questions for the commission's consideration with respect to the jurisdiction, and this has to do with the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association appeal. The first question the commission needs to consider is, did Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association submit written comments within the comment period? The second question is, did the neighborhood association properly seek a fee waiver? And we've set forth the procedures that we would recommend the commission follow with respect to those questions. The first question relates to Oregon City Municipal Code 1750-190-D1, which provides that only those persons or recognized neighborhood associations who submitted comments in writing before the expiration of the comment period have standing to appeal a community development director decision. So you have to have commented during the open record period. And the commission needs to decide whether a number of emails signed by Carla Laws, BHNA chair, indicating that the attached comments were submitted on behalf of Mr. Donnelly without more qualify as comments submitted by the neighborhood association. The second question is whether or not the neighborhood association properly attained or pursued the proper steps before asking the commission for a fee waiver. And here the relevant code section is 1750-290C. Appeal fee shall not be charged, it should be charged, not changed, for an appeal filed by a city-recognized neighborhood association so long as the appeal has been officially approved by the general membership or board of the neighborhood association at a duly announced meeting. And the commission needs to decide to what extent a neighborhood must demonstrate, quote, official approval of the neighborhood's desire to appeal. Must it include the notice information? Must it include a specific fee waiver request as part of a decision to proceed with an appeal? Must that be clear whether the decision was made by the board or the neighborhood general membership? So those are the two questions that are sort of prefatory to moving forward with the merits. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think the parties are all here to present their positions. And I would turn it back over to Mayor Les-Smith.
All right, thank you, Ms. Richter. So we're going to start the...
I actually have some questions, if I may, please, since she said she would answer some.
I would be happy to answer any questions, sure.
Are they about process or are
they are about what she just said?
Okay.
So my question is, these items that are preliminary jurisdictional items, these are not items that have been brought by the city, correct?
Correct.
These are items that have been challenged by the applicant.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to be very clear on that.
Yes, that's it. That's a good question. All right, so we're going to start with the public testimony. As you can see, what's on the screen, it's also on this poster board over here, which challenges all of our eyeballs to see exactly what it says from this distance. So the slide is definitely helpful. I also have it on paper. So we're going to start out with 15 minutes with the appellant, who's representing the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association. You can come on up. That's fine. Both of you can come up since we have 2 desks and microphones and. Yes.
I'm James Donnelly. Can you hear me okay? Can I pull my mask down?
You can. You remove your mask to speak. And before you get started, just procedurally, you have a clock up here that gives you your 15 minutes. And just to make sure, we have multiple pieces of this appeal, so try to keep your comments to these 2 questions, preferably about the comment period and the fee waiver, the items that Ms. Richter, our attorney, has talked about. We'll handle the other topics and the next time we go through this.
I will stick to the agenda.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, my name is James Donnelly. I'm a 27-year resident of Oregon City. I represent the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association in the Comprehensive Planning and Land Use Committee. I'm the chair. This is also a member. I'd like to start off with the Confederated Tribes. There was 2 letters that I submitted with the appeal. I did find a 3rd letter today that I was unaware of. And there are...
Mr. Donnelly?
Yes.
Your comments are not pertaining to the fee waiver or the comments about the public comment period.
So what is it we're allowed to talk about?
Right now.
The fee waiver?
Can I consult with him?
Oh, go ahead, take it over.
We have to talk about. They're saying we. No, we'll talk about the rest of this.
Yeah, there will be other opportunities to talk about the other
This
pieces.
isn't your only.
So I requested a fee waiver when I submitted the appeal. I put every piece of information I could think of on the application, and I attempted to submit it, and I was continually refused at the window by Laura Tearaway and also by Kelly Reed. When I first walked into the planning department, there was a gal that was in the glass box, and I said, all I want to do is submit an appeal. Can you please timestamp it? She said, no, I don't do appeals. It's just a timestamp. So Kelly Reed was sent out, and I said, what's your name? And I had to ask her twice, and she finally told me, and I said, I just want to get this timestamped and have it dropped off. And no, you can't do that. You have to pay a fee. And I said, no, it says right here on your cover sheet of the packet that we received on the lower paragraph that a duly noted representative of the Berkeley Hills Association does not have to pay a fee. And I was told by her that, well, I can't accept it because our computer won't let us. Okay, then the next step was that she kept leaving the room and talking to Laura Tearaway. She would come back again with another problem. And this went on it should have been a 30-second visit, and it was more like a little over an hour up at the window just trying to submit this and get a timestamp. Meanwhile, I saw a old-fashioned timestamp sitting right next to the window, and I said, well, can you stamp it with that and then print and sign your name so I can leave? And, oh, well, I still can't accept it because you have to pay a fee. At this point, Laura Tearaway was there, and she said, yeah, you have to fill out some other stuff, and you've got to leave and come back later. And I said, I'm not leaving until you accept this. Today's the day for the appeal, and I'm going to submit it. So that's what I attempted to do. And in the meantime, Kelly Reed kept leaving and talking to Laura Tearaway, and I was told that all this has to be scanned. We can't accept it like this. And I said, there's nowhere that it says it has to be scanned or I have to submit it electronically. The other issue was that they just flat out didn't want to accept it and kept sliding everything back out the window to me. And at that point, I texted Carla Laws, and I said, I really need you to come up here as a witness to see what is going on here. And so she did show up, and the first thing that happened was Laura Tearaway and Kelly Reed noticed that she was there, and they tried to attempt to tell Carla Laws that I didn't seem to understand what I needed to do. Carla Laws stated that he does understand what you're trying to do, and you're trying to reject his appeal. You have to accept it. I'm sure it'll be heard. And then they said, well, we need a fee. And I said, should I pay you a fee and then request it at the hearing? And she said, yes, you should pay us a fee. I know I never see that money again. So I said, I brought a pen, and I'm going to write on the corner of it, I request a fee waiver, James Donnelly, 8/5/2021. And lo and behold, I finally got a timestamp and a printed name and looks like a signature by Kelly Reed. I believe that someone overheard Carla and I talk about, well, I'm going to take this down to City Hall, and I'm going to also get this time-stamped. Oh, by the way, one of the things that Kelly Reed did was she started to go through all the pages, and she would see things, and she says, you don't want me to scan this, do you? I said, are you going to pull things out of my appeal? You can't do that. Yes, that's how it is. I want to submit it. I had 3 copies. Then we left, and I ended up going to City Hall. There was a woman receptionist there. I'd never seen her before, and I've been to City Hall several times, and walked in with the 2 copies, left a third at the planning department, and I said, I like these time-stamped, and I'd like one of them through your intermail to go up to planning, so I have proof that I submitted something. I had to do this when I submitted a letter a letter of concern about the project on Holmes Lane. The woman that worked there put 2 sticky notes, one on each copy, and stamped the sticky notes. And I said, can you stamp the original copy and please sign and date it, or sign and print and sign your name? And she took the sticky notes and she threw them over her shoulders. She stamped one and threw the other one at me. And that was my transaction at City Hall. I then gave Carla Laws a call, and I told her exactly what happened. And it seems as though that someone had called ahead, and maybe they were waiting for me to not accept my appeal at City Hall as well. So I really don't see how transparent Oregon City planning is. It doesn't seem fair that the citizens that want to file an appeal seem to just get pooped on, and it's the city that you work for, and I was under the impression that maybe she worked for somebody else. So, yes, go ahead.
The bottom line here is a fee waiver was given. There's documentation, you should have it in your agenda packet, that a fee waiver was granted because it was Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association submitting the appeal. Jim is the chairman of the Comprehensive Planning and Land Use Committee. There also were emails sent with documentation that at a Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association meeting in May, a motion was made to authorize Jim to make comments and make the appeal, and a vote was taken and passed that made him have the authority of the neighborhood association to represent all of us in this matter. In addition, because of the problems with getting comments initially submitted and properly time-stamped, the steering committee agreed to formally appoint Jim as the chairman of the Comprehensive Planning and Land Use Committee for Berkeley Hills Association. Now, the city does not have any authority over how neighborhood associations conduct their business, internal business. The city does have very specific guidelines for neighborhood associations to be set up. They represent a certain area within the city. They have to have written bylaws, and those bylaws have to state exactly how the officers of the association will be elected, terms of office, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That has been mandated under the city codes for any neighborhood association to be established. Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association has complied with all of the requirements. So, to challenge whether or not an appeal submitted had the right to get a fee waiver, which is guaranteed for any neighborhood association who wants to submit a comment, appeal, whatever. I find this is a non-issue, and I think that the commission and the mayor, that you all have the right to say, no, it was appropriate to have a fee waiver. Thank you.
I've said all I need to say about this.
If we have questions of them, should we ask them now?
Yes, you should.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. I remember your first name was Catherine, but I don't remember your last name, I'm sorry.
Peaslewitz. You said it right the first time.
Yeah, I just don't have it in front of me right now. So were you at the meeting
No.
where the vote took place? You weren't?
Not in May, but
Okay.
my sweet man was, and he was one of the ones that voted
Her husband.
at that
Okay.
meeting. So I was out of state at the time,
Okay, I was just wondering.
yes.
Do you have any questions?
No, my concern is primarily that because individuals have been authorized by the neighborhood association to submit documents on their behalf, that this is being challenged. I just find it a little ironic and specious. So,
Do you have any questions?
no,
Questions?
I think they were very clear.
All right, thank you.
We're done here?
I see Ms. Laws. They had 2 minutes left of their 50.
Yeah, there's some time left.
My name's Carla Laws. I'm Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Chair. My argument here is we had a virtual meeting with Steve Miller and Amaretto Designs in November of 2020. And those minutes were valid, right? Like, and we took a virtual attendance, right? So those minutes are valid and considered valid that they presented to us. Yet, my minutes on May 11th, 2021, even though we sent a postcard in advance. I'm the secretary, so I write all the notes since I don't have a secretary of the neighborhood association, wrote those minutes. And again, we did a special notification for a special meeting 11 days in advance, posted in Oregon City Chit Chat, Nextdoor, posted on, where else was it? Oregon City Watchdogs, on also the Neighborhood Association Facebook page, anywhere we could, to announce that the Neighborhood Association was having a special meeting, 7 p.m., 5:20, at St. John the Apostle Cemetery. And that, I have screenshots. I sent it to the planning department. And I have the signatures. I have it written that Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association supports appeal and supports Jim Donnelly as the head of the Comprehensive Planning and Land Use Committee. So it's just very clear, and it feels like to me, what does it even matter if you're not going to count my minutes as me even being a valid person? And what's to say Steve Miller even presented to me then, if you want to argue the same argument? It's total, just upsetting to me. It's like, where does the neighborhood even stand? Anyways, that is my point. And the other thing that I want to say is, you know, it's just, you have to take a neighborhood with minimal resources very seriously. We've been limited because of COVID. It's not fair to these neighbors. Many neighbors don't know. And we're trying to help them. And Laura Turway said, I rely on you as the neighborhood chair to get that information out. I don't have the budget to send out a postcard for a special meeting. Anyways, this is where I'm at, and I wanted to give you that information. Please consider, if they don't want to consider my minutes, they should not consider Steve Miller presenting to me. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ms. Laws. So that concludes the 15 minutes from the appellant, the Barclay Hills Neighborhood Association. Next, we'll have 15 minutes from the appellant, the appellant applicant. Could you, I don't have your names in front of me, so when you come up, could you please state your name and business or residence, city, and you will have 15 minutes as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Once again, my name is Garrett Stevenson. I'm an attorney for the applicant. And I want to apologize in advance. I'm actually filling in for my law partner who was unable to make it tonight. So if you see me running backwards to the folks behind me for substantive answers to your questions, please forgive me. But I have tried to get up to speed on things, and I'm prepared to argue our motion to dismiss. But I regret, before I do that, I got to tell you, I'm really concerned with a statement that I just heard from Commissioner McGriff. And the last thing that I ever want to do as an applicant's attorney, and especially one that's just filling in, is challenge somebody for bias. But I was prepared to move forward on the assumption that Commissioner McGriff was not biased and could make a fair decision. But she just stated that she believed that our motion to dismiss as a procedural matter was specious, and that to me crosses a line, and I'm unable to allow that to go forward without objecting to her participation. So at this point, I'm going to object to McGriff's on the participation in this hearing and the next on the basis of bias. I actually know Commissioner McGriff pretty well, and I'm very surprised I have to do this, and I don't take any joy in doing it, and I admire her very greatly as a person, and but on the other hand, I have a duty to my client, and that last statement suggests to me that if her view is that simply bringing a motion to dismiss is in itself specious, that implies prejudgment, and we have to object. So I'd like the record to reflect that.
Do I get to respond?
So moving on from that, I'd like to argue the motion to dismiss. And what you heard a lot of was concerns about whether or not the appeal was timely. That's not the grounds for our motion to dismiss. The grounds for our motion to dismiss are really twofold, and they both have to do with standing. The first one is that the BHNA failed to pay the required fee and failed to request a fee waiver. Now, all of that's pretty well discussed in our materials, and I'm not going to go that in too much detail, but basically, the OCMC provides that appeal fees shall not be charged for an appeal filed by a neighborhood association so long as the appeal has been officially approved by the general membership or board of neighborhood association or a duly announced hearing. And the reason why the BHNA presented on this motion to dismiss before we did, which is kind of a little bit of a reversal, typically the applicant would go first, is because the BHNA has the burden of proof to demonstrate that it met all the requirements. A couple things that they're required to do under the code is explain their basis of their standing, and they failed to do that anywhere in their application materials. The second thing that they have to do is demonstrate that they requested the fee waiver, and they would have had to do that at a duly announced hearing. Well, from what I can tell, from what limited I know of the record, is that they voted on, I believe it was May 20th, 2021, at a special meeting, and at that point they decided that they were going to file an appeal. I would add that that was after the written comment period had closed. So there's really no question when it comes to standing of the timeliness appeal. The question is, did they go through the proper steps? We don't believe they did. It's explained to you in our materials. What we would be looking for is evidence that they actually duly announced the special meeting. We don't have any evidence of that I could find. So I know this is, to a lot of folks, a bunch of legal gobbledygook, but it's important stuff because the reason why we have standing rules is so that folks like my client who have rights to apply to use their property don't have to suffer unfair surprise. We all play by the same legal rules. If we're going to oppose somebody's project, we have to establish our standing. So this is not anything new. Standing is a fundamental precept of any quasi-judicial action. So that's why we're making this motion to dismiss. The second basis for our motion to dismiss has to do with the fundamental fact that if you want to appeal something, you have to get on the record with your own comments before you appeal. You have to establish your standing. And the way you do that in Oregon City is you have to submit comments before the written record period has closed. So that requires us to take a look at the timeline. November 10th, the applicant appeared before the BHNA to discuss the project. Notice was sent out of the application on May 10th, explaining that the comment deadline is May 24th. A second public notice was sent out on May 21st, which extended the comment deadline to June 4th. So at this point, anybody who wants to make a comment on the project has between May 10th and June 4th to make their comments. That's 2 weeks more than the typical 2-week period. Email was later sent to the BHNA chair, as I understand it, and the vice chair explaining that they had, in fact, until June 7th to submit comments because I understand that the city hall was closed on June 4th. Despite all of this, the neighborhood never submitted any comments of its own in relation to the application during the written record period. That's how you achieve standing. They did not achieve standing. The comments we got were from Jim Donnelly, forwarded by Carla Laws, and those comments say that he gave me permission to share this on his behalf. Jim Donnelly's comment said, these are comments on my behalf. There was no other comments in the record purporting to be from the BHNA. And again, these don't purport to be from the BHNA. So we have no comments, either explicitly or impliedly, from the BHNA prior to the close of the open record period, the written record period. At the end of the day, standing is a simple thing. You have to submit comments, and then you as an organization have achieved standing. What you can't do is take comments that somebody submits on their behalf and somehow turn those into your own to achieve standing now that you finally decided that you want to appeal. That is absolutely contrary to what the code says. It's not how any quasi-judicial process that I'm aware of works. Again, the rules are here to prevent unfair surprise so that the applicant has a reasonable ability to answer comments of those who might potentially appeal. In this case, we didn't have any expectation that the BHNA would appeal as of the date that the record closed. This may be a formality, but like so many of the formalities that are throughout the OCMC and throughout state law, that there's a purpose for this. And I understand the frustration of the neighbors. I do this for a living, and I have to tell you, I get as angry about the details as anybody else. But the details matter. They matter to my client. We certainly don't want to be here defending an appeal, and it is entirely prudent for us if we see that our appellant doesn't have standing to raise the issue before this commission. It's nothing personal. It's our duties as legal counsel to do so. So with that, it's the applicant's contention that the commission is without jurisdiction to hear BHNA's appeal tonight. I'm happy to answer questions if you have them.
Do you have any questions? Commissioner Smith, do you have any questions? Okay, I see you saying no, trying to find the mute button.
Yes.
All right. So Commissioner McGriff, I know you have a desire to.
No, I don't have any questions, though.
No questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Richter, do you have any statement or advice or anything that we need to know regarding Commissioner McGriff's participation at this point?
Sorry, it's like the mute button. No, Mr. Stevenson has made an objection on the record. I think Commissioner McGriff has been clear about her view of things. If she wants to respond, certainly she may, but I think we proceed as we are moving along.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to respond at this time.
Okay.
Just for the record, Ms. Richter, I do not wish to respond at this time.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, we're going to move on in the public testimony process. I don't believe we have any other neighborhood associations signed up to present. And then we have the ability to have individuals sign up to participate public comment on this item. And Lisa. Okay, so for this portion, we do not have any individuals, and therefore we are at the 5-minute appellant neighborhood association rebuttal. So if you would like to provide any 5-minute rebuttal to what the applicant just presented to us.
The applicant's attorney clearly stated for the record that the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association held a meeting in May. And at that meeting, they elected Jim Donnelly to represent them and file comments. The deadline for filing those comments was June 4th. The attorney stated that the association did not choose Mr. Donnelly to represent them until after the comment period had passed. The comment period actually was extended to June 7th, but that was not widely known. There was not a wide notification of that, so there were very few people that even knew those additional dates took place. That doesn't even matter here. if their grounds are that the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association was not represented by Jim Donnelly due to his not getting that position or anything being said about him representing them until after the comment period passed, then I am afraid that attorney who seems to be very concerned about dates and timelines misdated his timeline. That's my comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Piesowitz with the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association. I think there were 2 minutes left. State your name for the record real quick.
Carla Laws, Oregon City. My biggest concern is I'm the neighborhood chair, and I was never informed that we had until the 7th. I was told the 4th. I never got an email, never got notification, and I'm the neighborhood chair. To me, that is a big problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Laws. All right, so at this time, we will have questions of staff, discussion, and hopefully a decision, a motion, a decision on this item. Does anybody want to start?
I am smiling under my mask.
Smiling under your
Yes.
mask, yeah, I can't see it, but. No questions? So I guess I'll start since I'm not seeing anybody jump to it. And nobody's making an emotion either. So this is a question for, obviously, for staff and our attorney. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the full timeline, and I've seen the comments, or I've seen the notes that were presented in the packet from the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association meeting from May 11th. And then there's also information where Mr. Donnelly had submitted some comments. Has the staff ever questioned, or was it ever in question whether or not the initial comments submitted by the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association was within the acceptable public comment time period?
The comments submitted by Mr. Donnelly, as well as the email forward from Ms. Laws, were submitted within the comment period. There was a second email from Ms. Laws responding to an email from Pete Walter at the Planning Division, informing her of the extension from the Friday when the office was closed on June 4th, which was supposed to be the last day of the comment period, to that following Monday. Ms. Laws replied to that email, and it's referred to in your staff report, but that seems to be a more direct participation from BHNA, given that it says BHNA chair underneath her signature line. It's not talking about substantive issues in the appeal, just more of the process about the extension of the comment period. I can read it for you if you like.
So the date, though, the date of the public comment, so I feel like we have a couple of comment submittals that we're looking at. If I'm looking at the exhibit, let me look and talk about which one I'm talking about. It was the third one listed in the agenda, Appeal AP 21-00004 by the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association PDF. The appeal, there was a couple of things we're talking about. So the very top page of that packet of information, it's a 48-page PDF. That was the submission regarding the appeal fee and actually making the appeal. But the applicant is saying that they didn't submit public comment during the public comment period, and by the correct time period. And so I'm trying to make sure I understand, because there's a bunch of stuff that's put all together in this 48-page, and I see other notes that are submitted by the neighborhood association, and so it's hard to understand. I'm scrolling through because it's all together. Because it seems like this timeline, the timeline is one of the biggest issues, but they are time-stamped, and so I see one that says June 4th, and that does make me think that they submitted comments within the public comment time period, and then they came back and did the appeal thing all correct within the time period.
Ms. Laws submitted comments on behalf of Mr. Donnelly as described before, so it's up to the commission to identify if that's as BHNA or just passing along somebody else's comments, not on behalf of BHNA. Then, so the comment period lasted till June 4th, which was a Friday. Our office was closed. And so the planner at the time had sent an email to the neighborhood association chair and vice chair saying, hey, we'll extend it till Monday because we're closed today and we understand that there's frustration. And so replying to that email, we had a response from Ms. Laws with a footer that said BHNA. All of that was done on June 4th before the end of the close of the comment period. So it's up to the commission to decide if either the initial email from Ms. Laws forwarding on Mr. Donnelly's comments was on behalf of BHNA, and if the second email also was on behalf of BHNA.
Okay. Ms. Richter?
I just want to clarify the meeting minutes that are attached to the appeal, May 11th and May 20th, were not submitted during the open record period. It was submitted as part of the appeal, and that is what BHNA is using to establish that the vote for a fee waiver was duly authorized.
Right.
But that does not establish Jim Donnelly withstanding during the comment period, because his written comments from the comment period do not say submitted by Mr. Donnelly on behalf of the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association.
I got you. But there was an email exchange between Ms. Laws, Ms. Turway, and maybe Mr. Donnelly, I don't know, about this submittal of public comments and who's representing BHNA, right?
So on June 4th, when staff extended the comment period till the following Monday, June 7th, the planner, Pete Walter, had written an email to the neighborhood association chair and co-chair to let him know. I can read the response from Ms. Laws if you'd like. It's pretty short.
Sure.
It says, Pete, we should have had prior warning, and this should be noted online. This is disappointing. How can I serve my community as a volunteer if information is not forthcoming? Jim Donnelly had this dropped off and time-stamped at City Hall. I have also scanned each page in an email with his permission. Please make this process easier and more inviting for residents. Please update your information online. Sincerely, Carla Laws, BHNA Chair.
Okay. All right. Other questions?
Well, I think, I don't know, I didn't intend to come here tonight feeling like I was in a court of law, but it's going that way. I'm not a lawyer. I think from what I've read, and I guess staff and our attorney can correct me, is based on the evidence that was submitted. I think that, putting on citizen hat, sort of a neighborhood hat, trying to understand what's behind all of this, is that I think based on the vote that they took in May, that Mr. Donnelly was under the direction of the neighborhood association to submit the comments, and that he was acting on their behalf, whether it said so or not. That was, I believe you said he was land use chair. So I think that there is, trying to look at it from the standpoint of an ordinary citizen, it seems to me that he was proceeding based on what he was directed to do. And I think therein lies the question of a citizen trying to do the right thing by acting on behalf of his association to do something that they had directed. Maybe they should have submitted the minutes with that, but I don't know why they didn't, or maybe they weren't aware that they needed to. So that's sort of the assumption that I'm getting from reading all the documentation and then hearing the testimony. Does that seem completely off base?
No, I think you're right. I agree. I agree with you, and I've participated in plenty of neighborhood association meetings. Some are very formal, some struggle to get meeting minutes out. So, I can understand the frustration from the neighborhood of, their meeting minutes coming under scrutiny, not knowing that they were going to need, a specific line in here, or, that it was going to be called to question. I do believe that they were trying to jump through the hoops and do the right thing, and thought that they had sufficiently had it documented.
Right, fulfilled that, yes.
So, yeah.
So the timeline, in my mind, based on the evidence that I see in the packet and testimony and information from staff, says to me that they established standing, that they have the ability to move forward.
Commissioner Smith or Commissioner Morrow? So we have this item, but it would be good to get any more comments or questions about the written comments and comment period item, and then we still need to talk about the fee waiver.
I actually agree with what the comments that were just made. I do believe that they were acting on behalf of the neighborhood association based on all the information that we've looked at. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I'll just say that it's my understanding that Ms. Laws sent that email from a personal email, but added the BHNA chair. So when I'm thinking of when I'm using my personal email, I'm not adding city commissioner at the end. So I think I'm just trying to understand, obviously I think she added the BHNA chair at the end as the signature to signify this is on behalf of my neighborhood association. And so that's what I'm taking into mind right now.
All right. Ms. Richter, do you want us to vote on each one of these separately, or let's maybe continue talking about them and make them?
Continue talking and make a decision with respect to
This.
the perfection of BHNA.
Right. Okay.
That makes sense.
Yep. So the second item that we haven't talked about is the fee waiver. So I'm looking at the exhibit, the very first page that was submitted. This is the one that was date stamped 8/5/21 by Kelly Reed, signed by Kelly Reed. It has the Jim Donnelly signature. I request a fee waiver. So I don't know if we need to bring that up, but there's a Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association is written in the middle and is circled, and there's a no written, and I believe that means somebody circled that and is trying to address the filing fee paid. And there's written text at the top that says submitted by James Donnelly, representative of the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association, Comprehensive Planning and Land Use Committee representative, clearly in the same handwriting as the person who was filling this out. When I look at this, this clearly says to me that this appeal was trying to represent the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association. It's time and date stamped by Kelly Reed. It's also time and date stamped what I presume would be City Hall on the same date. Because again, as stated earlier, I do know I talked to them because they were very frustrated about this whole time date stamp issue, and they asked if they could go to City Hall to make that. So I guess I'm trying to understand what am I missing here on the ability to seek a fee waiver. I thought we've been pretty clear that the neighborhood associations can easily ask for a fee waiver, and this seems pretty apparent to me that this was the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association representing in that exhibit.
Flipping pages.
So the issue is with respect to the code language that says that the appeal has been officially approved by the general membership or board of the neighborhood association at a duly announced meeting, and that the minutes do not reflect a discussion of the fee waiver. I think that's the issue. And I appreciate that that's a hyper-technical reading perhaps, but that's the language of the code.
Commissioner Smith, I see you.
Yeah, go ahead, Rocky.
Go ahead, Rocky.
The thought that came to my head, if they were having a meeting regarding the appeal, I doubt the topic of a waiver would have came up if they assumed that neighborhoods automatically get a waiver. I don't know why that would be written in the minutes.
I think you're correct that that's widely known in the Citizen Involvement Committee, that as long as it's done at a neighborhood meeting, at least based on my experience of being the CIC rep from the City Commission, that as long as it's voted on and officially approved at a duly noticed meeting, that they will be able to submit an application for whatever it is and request, and that the fee is waived. I think that's just been an assumption among our neighborhood associations. Now, maybe procedurally, as Ms. Richter said, it is not specific, and I think I'm only aware of one neighborhood association that has done that consistently, is because our chair happens to be an attorney. So, and I don't think any of the other neighborhood associations in the city have attorneys as their chair.
Right. Yeah, I'm also aware of other neighborhood associations using an executive committee to make decisions in order to make the timelines of the Planning Commission, and we've never called that into question. And so I definitely want to make sure that we're treating all of our neighborhood associations fairly, and when they we do not prescriptively tell them how to run their meetings. We don't tell them how to, do their meeting minutes. We don't give them, a template to fill out or anything like that. They do operate on their own. I guess I'll ask a question. I know we
do have approved charters for all of them because they submitted the proper documentation to be an officially recognized is the word I want, resignation, officially recognized neighborhood associations. And I believe we have 8. Is that how many we have? 12?
So we received the memo from the applicant today or yesterday. I don't recall.
Is it the one dated the 31st?
Probably. And in that, it was forwarded to us from Jacob today, and it included the bylaws of the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association. Ms. Richter, can you address that concern again of the applicant? Or I want to make sure, again, they were calling into the, I guess, BHNA's process and how it's spelled out.
So as I understand the applicant's letter, they were asking the commission to take official notice of the bylaws to establish or to call into question the sort of notice and the process that the neighborhood association went through. And, the commission can decide whether they want to take official notice or not. The statute that the applicant cited, ORS 40, I can't remember the rest, relates to enactments of local governments. And neighborhood associations are not local governments, and they are not, they do not operate subject to local government oversight. So I don't think that statute applies. And I don't think, whether or not BHNA followed their own bylaws is not the question the criterion asks. The question is not, to perfect a neighborhood appeal, you must show that you've satisfied your bylaws. It is that you voted at a duly announced meeting. And that's all it says. And it doesn't say how much announcement has to be given, doesn't say how the notice has to occur. So I don't know that the city wants to be in the business of micromanaging neighborhood association business, which is independent and operates on its own independent track.
I think, commissioners, the issue, one of the issues that we have had a concern about during this particular trying time of COVID is that neighborhood associations are accustomed to meeting in person, face to face. And because we've had situations where people don't feel safe, the facilities that these neighborhoods normally meet in have not been available, so they have had to have meetings virtually. The notices that the city helps provide the neighborhood associations, I think they get like 6 a year. Generally, there are not any additional funds available for special meetings. So most of the neighborhoods, and again, I'm speaking from the standpoint of being the former city representative on the Citizen Involvement Committee, and also having been a past member of that organization myself as a neighborhood representative, that they have sent out, most neighborhoods will send out a virtual notice. They will post it in many of the places where they think that their neighborhood members are going to be looking for those notices, such as was mentioned next door. Facebook, most of the neighborhood associations have Facebook pages, some of them don't. They're looking at other sites where their constituents might be looking. It's really hard to post something because, we don't allow posting on telephone poles and things like that. So I think the neighborhoods, all of them, I'm speaking for all of them, have done a yeoman's job of trying to get the word out to their constituents virtually, because that's all we really have available. Berkeley Hills is one of the bigger neighborhood areas, so I think based on what I saw in the record, I think that they did provide notice to their members to let them know there was going to be this special meeting to review this particular project. And I think that they did the best they could based on the situation. And again, we're not in normal times. We're not going back to any normal times. So neighborhoods are working on perfecting how they get that message out virtually. So I think that, with all due respect to the applicant, I think that the neighborhood association did provide the notice of their meeting to the best of their ability based on this particular unfortunate situation that we all find ourselves in.
Anyone else? If not, does anybody have a motion? think we need to address this one item officially before we can move on to the substantive review of the appeals.
Didn't Ms. Richter say that we had 2 items to determine, that we had to determine whether or not they have standing and whether or not they're able to have the fee waived? Is that correct?
Correct.
Yep.
But I think the motion can be as simple as we find that Barkley Hills Neighborhood Association properly perfected their appeal and fee waiver. I don't think you need to make it much more complicated than that if you.
Yeah,
I'm certainly happy to help you make it complicated.
Right, no, I was looking through the staff report to see our options for some of the motions, but it didn't specifically address this one small item, so.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Wiley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel Eyes Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so now we've established that the BHNA can participate in the next round of the appeals. And it is 8:40, if I'm reading that clock correctly. So I think we want to take a 5-minute break. Let's everybody regroup because we're going to start a new piece. I will tell you, we probably will not go till 11 o'clock tonight. I'm going to stop this before it gets too late. But we will pause this. Is it okay with you guys to pause? I think it's.
Do we want to make a determination of how late? We have one really important thing we do have to do.
Yeah, we'll tackle that when we start the next piece of the appeal process. We'll talk about process and timing and how late we're going to go tonight so we can make sure we talk about the general business. Do you have something to add? All right, so let's take a 5-minute break and come back at, let's come back at 8:45. you
Ready to go.
All right, so I'm calling the City Commission regular meeting back to order after our break. I will apologize for the extended time period. I was needing to sort out all of our public comment cards. I have 3 different piles up here for this next section. I needed to make sure that everybody was properly in the right piles. All right, and with that, I think we're ready to get started on the substantive review of the appeals. And so I know, Ms. Richter, you're going to kick this off. And I guess I would say to Ms. Richter and Ms. Turway at some point, I have a feeling we're going to run out of time because I'm going to limit this in time so we can wrap up our other general business items. And this will likely be continued. So if you can cover that process when you're going through so that everybody's on the same page about process and next steps, that would be wonderful. All right.
Sure. And we'll go quickly through the staff report, as I know people are waiting. So if I can, let's see. Okay. So the substantive review on the merits is limited, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the ways in which it's limited. So this is to be contrasted with de novo review, where anybody talks about anything they want, but this is fairly prescribed, and it's prescribed by code. In the appeal section of the code, there are very specific limitations about how the City Commission conducts its review. The first requirement is only those individuals who submitted comments may participate. There is no new evidence and no new facts beyond what is already contained in the record. All issues presented tonight have to have been raised in the notice of appeal and raised in the comments. And the fourth thing is that all issues must relate to the applicable approval criteria. So those are the limitations prescribed by code. I want to make sure the commission understands those limitations and doesn't have any questions about them before we sort of move through this. So we have made a list of those individuals who submitted testimony during the comment period. We had listed Ms. Laws and the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association because we were not sure how the commission was going to characterize her emails during the comment period. We know now that the commission has decided to characterize those emails as submitted on behalf of the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association and not by Ms. Laws as an individual. So she is able to testify tonight on behalf of the Neighborhood Association, but not on behalf of herself as an individual.
What about James Donnelly?
Mr. Donnelly submitted testimony on behalf of himself. He submitted written testimony signed by himself that did not say anything about Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association. So I believe Mr. Donnelly can testify as an individual, but I'm happy to.
Are these the same comments, though, that we just said he submitted on behalf of Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association?
Well, you have Jim Donnelly's comments that he submitted on his own, and then you have Carla Laws submitting them as well, right? The same comments. And I was under the impression that the commission's interpretation was that Ms. Laws was representing the neighborhood association when she submitted Mr. Donnelly's comments on behalf of the neighborhood association. And that Mr. Donnelly submitted those comments on his own.
It's not
So
my,
there are two copies, of the same thing.
I understand, but I'm not sure that we're all in agreement. And that's why I want to address this now. So my interpretation, though, was when we talked about the appeal, sorry, I was told I was not understandable with my mask on. Is that better? My understanding when we reviewed it as a commission, though, we looked at that appeal fee application, which Mr. Donnelly filled out, and we just said was representative for the fee application piece of it was representative of Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association. So to me, I view those as participating for Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree, since their motion and their minutes stated that he was authorized to represent them, as well as Catherine, and then we also have Ms. Laws, so.
Right. Commissioner Smith, I see your head nodding.
Yes, I agree with that, yes.
I agree.
Okay. And so this is helpful, and if some of you saw me running around, this is clarifying these comment cards, because I have them in piles, and that's what I was trying to make sure we were getting us on the same page. So in this list, Carla Laws, James Donnelly, Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association, all three of them are considered Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association if they want to participate, or when they participate in this process.
Correct.
Okay.
Then we have the question of the record. We said that only those people who submitted comments were able to submit testimony into the record. The commission has received letters from others whose names are not on that list. Jim and Ardith Hall, Christian Nauer, and Leon Leigel. Those names are not on the list. So those items would be rejected by the commission and not considered. The Carla Laws emails, we are assuming she is speaking on behalf of Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association, so those emails would come in.
So can you, I'm sorry to pause. I just, for the clarification, this table says staff recommends reject from the record and staff recommends accept into the record. Is there a decision for the city commission, or is that a staff recommendation?
It is a decision for the city commission, but we were going to wait until you're ready to make a decision and you would reject. I mean, I think what we're trying to preface for you is don't consider these items if you're not going to take them into the record. Right? Don't consider them as your deliberation, but we'd like to have, as part of the motion, rejection of testimony submitted by those who did not participate. Issues not related to the approval criteria. This is always a requirement, right? All the testimony needs to relate to the approval criteria. The applicant in their written materials have identified issues raised by the neighborhood association that they argue are not related to the approval criteria. We have listed those in this slide. There are, staff has struck through those provisions that we don't agree with. We don't need to get into, I'm not going to read this slide, but I think it is set forth in the staff report and we can deal with it if the commission has questions. Here are the applicable approval criteria that are relevant to this decision. There are slides missing. And one of the things I want to point out before I turn it back over to Ms. Turway are that there are some needed housing laws that apply in addition to the approval criteria that are set forth in the staff report that essentially put their thumb on the scale in favor of housing. The city has an obligation with respect to housing applications to make a decision based on clear and objective review criteria, which means that criteria that require the exercise of policy judgment cannot apply to such an application. The city cannot apply those types of criteria. So this is a circumstance where these are type 2 decision, meaning that there is limited discretion. It is baked into the system that the criteria are clear and objective. We delegate the reviews to city staff because the question of the use and the density are not in dispute.
Right.
It's more a question of the layout and the orientation and that sort of, and it's a check the boxes exercise more so than I would, by contrast, a conditional use permit where there's all kinds of discretionary approval criteria that go into this. This is a clear and objective exercise. The other thing I want to say quickly about needed housing is that if there is if there is a condition of approval that the commission has identified that would result in approval of the application, the commission has an obligation to impose the condition of approval as opposed to denial. In other types of applications, and when there's a choice between a condition of approval attached to an approval or a denial, it is the commission's choice which they want to pick. Not so with housing applications. If there is a condition of approval that will result in approval, you have to condition. So I'm going to turn it over to
Would you say that last thing again?
If there is a condition of approval identified that will result in approving the application and the criterion being satisfied, you have to adopt the approval with condition of approval as opposed to denial.
Boy, that was I mean, I know what you said, but for the average person, that is very confusing.
Sorry. Let me think of a better way to say this. If you can condition an application to satisfy the approval standards, you have to condition it.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That was much better. I think that would be most helpful to the members of the audience and anybody that's watching tonight
And all of us.
And all of us. Yes.
Okay. All right, now the staff report. So the subject site is identified on the screen. Subject site consists of 2 single-family dwellings with a series of accessory structures. They have limited frontage on Mountain View and frontage along Holmes Lane as well. The properties are both within the R2 multifamily dwelling district. Zooming in a little bit more, you can see that they are adjacent to Stafford Park, which is the grassy area to the right as well, and a single-family home, which is right between the subject site and the remaining portion of Stafford Park. The development proposal includes a lot line adjustment between those 2 houses, some demolition, and construction of 60 multifamily units, though if you look at the multifamily, if you look at the site plan, it does appear to look like a subdivision of townhomes and triplexes. It actually is a multifamily development because it's all on one piece of property with the right-of-way extending through it. There is what looks like an internal street system, and it says private street. Though you can ignore those labels because in the approval, think of them more as drive aisles in a multifamily development.
So you're saying it's not a private street?
It's not a private street.
Okay.
The city rejected the private street, and instead they're just drive aisles. Same as you would find in an apartment complex or something like that. All right, the structures themselves are mainly look like duplexes, so attached housing of 2 units. Here's a couple of excerpts of those, but there are a couple 3 and 4 plexes, and here's a couple view of what those look like as well. So I'm going to get into a high-level summary of the issues identified in the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association appeal. These are going to be the ones that are items that were brought up below and are brought up in the appeal as well. As Ms. Richter identified earlier, there are other issues that were brought up in the appeal that maybe weren't brought up below. So I'm just going to go over the high-level review of those ones that are.
All right, so the first item was the rezoning of the property. So the property, as we identified earlier, is zoned R2, which is a multifamily zoning designation. And there was a comment to rezone the property. The property is zoned R2, and so when an application is submitted, it's subject to the code criteria and zoning that's in place at that time, at the date of submittal. So our review is limited to this R2 review. Should the city commission want to change the zoning designation in the future, that won't go back and affect this proposal at this time. There is not a development criteria within this proposal that requires a different zoning designation. So they do get to proceed with the current zoning designation. The next issue is stormwater and runoff, particularly concern about how close the development is to Singer Creek and mud and different types of contaminants going from the development site into Singer Creek. So though the site is near Singer Creek, it's not within our natural resource overlay district, which is a buffer that surrounds the creek for environmental protection. So that is not on the table for this property. For the contaminants and reviewing stormwater, the subject site is subject to Chapter 1312 of the Municipal Code, which is our provisions that provide clear and objective standards for how we treat stormwater so that it is safe. And it includes reference to our grading and design standards in our grading and design manual as well. The city staff did an initial review of the proposal and then followed that with conditions of approval for further compliance as it goes through the development process. And so you did see that condition come through as well. There's no reason to believe that the applicant couldn't meet our standards. So in the record, we believe that they can meet our standards and thus the condition for it.
Ms. Turway, can I ask you real quick?
Yep.
Are there checkpoints along the way? Because you made reference that there's conditional improvements. It sounded like as part of the development, as it goes along, are there checkpoints by city staff to make sure that that occurs throughout the development process? It's not a do it all and check it at the end, or is it really a check way all the way through?
So we do have Josh Wheeler, I believe, on the line who could talk a little bit more in detail about specific stormwater standards. But in general, we're talking about how do you design the system so that it will be safe. And so those are clear standards when they go to, if the city commission approves this development, they'll work with our engineering department to identify final design of the systems and of the stormwater system. And it's at that point that engineering does look at the standards in the proposal and make sure that it complies. So the design itself should be sufficient. I think you're talking a little bit more about construction.
I think we're talking about all the conditions so that there are checkpoints along the way, knowing that we have had some issues with that in some other realm. My question would be supplementing the mayor's is that not just for stormwater, everything. If we put conditions on and we say you need to do this, this, and this, is it checked along the way for everything that's conditioned?
Yes, so building permits will come in, or people will want to plat or build a commercial development. And so we have 3 departments of the city that review development. We have planning, building, and public works. And before any dirt can turn, all 3 departments have to sign off on those. So each department will look at their associated conditions and requirements. And then we look at it again before it's final. And then we obviously have our building permit process as well. Also, the condition requires that the final plan is designed by a licensed engineer. So we have engineers in-house checking that as well. The next issue is related to transportation. John Replinger of Replinger and Associates is our city consultant who does our transportation review, and he can walk you through the items identified on the screen.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. As Laura said, I'm the city's consulting traffic engineer. Worked with the applicant's traffic engineer to identify the scope of the work and analyzed it in the applicant's submittal in conformance with the Oregon City requirements, specifically the guidelines for traffic transportation impact analysis. The applicant's engineer submitted an acceptable report. It discussed all of the requirements in the guidelines. It was determined that the street system was adequate to handle the additional traffic from the proposed development in conformance with the specifications that specifically are relating to the traffic operations of intersections. The Mountain View and the new street through the subdivision are adequate in terms of their ability to handle the traffic from the development. One of the issues that was brought up was speeding on Holmes Lane. That is not one of the criteria that needs to be addressed in the traffic study. The fact is that there is undoubtedly some speeding on all city facilities, all facilities throughout the region. It's unfortunate, but it is not an approval criteria or anything that needs to be addressed in traffic study.
Mr. Replinger, sir, how do you account for the fact that the traffic study said that the speed limit on Holmes Lane was 35 miles an hour and their documentation was based on that speed, which it is not, it's opposed to 25 mile an hour street, although they don't drive like that on there, obviously.
That's one of the points that I'll get to in just a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Also, there was concern about unreported traffic accidents. In fact, there are undoubtedly some traffic crashes that are not reported. There is a statutory limit in terms of when a motorist is obligated to report a crash. So it's possible that some of the crashes are of such minor consequence that they are not required to be reported. But then, frankly, some people probably just choose not to report them, even though it's a violation of the law. We have no reason to believe that the crashes that are reported or not reported in Oregon City are any different than experienced elsewhere through the state. There was an analysis done by the applicant's engineer, specifically requesting the data from the crash reporting unit of the Oregon Department of Transportation. They identified 10 crashes at the intersection of Molalla and Holmes Lane, no crashes elsewhere on Holmes Lane in the vicinity of the site. So they have satisfied the requirements of our guidelines. The applicant traffic study did cite the wrong speed limit on Holmes Lane, but in fact, they incorrectly identified it as 35 miles an hour, where in fact it's 25. The only effect of this is that the applicant's engineer assumed, based on that higher speed, that more sight distance would be required than if they had used the proper speed of 25. So there was no negative effect in terms of the assessing the adequacy of sight distance. Sight distance requirements are less with 25 than with 35. So it was not an error that produced any conclusion that was not borne out by the use of the correct number. Sight distance was,
on that topic.
there's a specific set of criteria in terms of distance back from the edge of the roadway, the eye height of the driver, the eye height of the oncoming vehicle. The engineer evaluated sight distance using those criteria. I did not independently identify or did not independently check all of the figures, but in terms of my site visit, I concluded that the engineer had probably done a proper measurement of the technique using the approved techniques, and that the engineer's conclusion about adequacy of the site distance was in fact correct. The amount of traffic generated by the development, as Ms. Tyrway explained, the development proposes 60 units of apartments. The engineer used the applicable trip generation rates from the Institute of Transportation Engineers for low-rise apartments. I think the values in it are correct, and they're the same kinds of values we've accepted for apartments of similar configuration elsewhere in the city, and are accepted throughout the region and the country.
I have a question for you before you go on while you're taking the breath in. So I appreciated your comment regarding additional site distance. Again, as I stated, I'm on that road probably at least 2 or 3 times a day, because as a caretaker of the Holmes house, I drive by just to see if anybody's messing around in the yard, or the lights are out or something in our front yard. So I know for a fact that there is, because of the uneven surface of Holmes Lane, there is a little bit of a site distance issue exiting onto Rylance. I usually don't exit onto Rylance. I usually exit from our driveway. But I think that, wouldn't you think it would be appropriate, given, although we don't have it documented, but again, the neighbors will probably testify. I mean, it is a cut through between Lynn Avenue and Molalla, and I will tell you this, they speed. It's even during COVID, when I was over there on a regular basis checking on the property, sometimes I would have to walk across the street to post a sign or something that the neighbors allowed us to post saying that the museum was going to be open or closed. And, you know, I didn't step out into that street without looking both ways many times, because people are just driving fast. So I think having additional site distances might be warranted, because of the fact that even though it's undocumented, we all know you want to go from Molalla to Lynn, that is the fastest way. There's no stop signs. It's no impediment. They're just jamming through there. And it's even more so now that was less during the initial period of COVID, but it's definitely, the traffic has picked up over the last 3 months.
The applicant's engineer measured site distance in excess of 400 feet from the intersection at Rylance, and that should be adequate for speeds of up 35 miles an hour, which means they would be, there would be adequate site distance to accommodate traffic speeding in excess of 10 miles an hour over the limit. So the site distance does seem to be adequate.
But could it be more adequate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, one can always.
If we can make it better, it's probably a good idea for us to make it a little better. Like I said, there's just a little bit of a rise when you're coming from Molalla Avenue, right at that area.
Increasing the site distance to account for a vertical curve would mean a rebuild of a substantial section of street. So that's a decision that could conceivably be made, but I don't find support for that in terms of the transportation system plan.
I mean, I will say honestly, my car, I have an SUV, so I sit up a little higher, but 2 weeks ago I had a normal size car and I was over there.
Excuse
it was
me.
not good. So I thank you for answering the question that we could have a little more site distance.
Commissioner McGriff, we talked about how this review is on the record,
yes,
and we need to keep it to the materials in the record and not your personal experience with respect to Holmes Lane.
Well, it's site distance. That was my concern, which is in the record.
I appreciate that, but let's keep it to site distance with respect to the record and the testimony that's been submitted into the record, and not your experience with site distance on Holmes Lane. Thank you.
Going back to the bullet point list, talked about the traffic impact was based upon the 60 units of low-density or low-rise apartments. Data at Alliance and Holmes, there were estimates that were included in the traffic study. And the volumes that were used in the base year and the future year appear reasonable. They're consistent with the volumes we would expect out of a cul-de-sac with the number of homes that exist on that street. The date of the traffic data, the applicant's engineer approached me at the time when COVID was rampant and there were many shutdowns, and in my judgment and the judgment of traffic engineers throughout the region, adjustments needed to be made because of the decrease in traffic volumes. The guidance that I gave the traffic engineer was to use historical data to increase it at a rate consistent with the historical record, and thus develop traffic volumes which I felt would be reasonable for year 2020 or 21 if COVID were not running rampant through the community. I'm confident that the traffic data that was used in the analysis is pretty close to what was would have been achieved by conducting a traffic count in a normal year. I don't find any deficiencies in the applicant's traffic study that would suggest that there was anything missed, and that I don't think a new traffic study based on any additional information or new data is warranted.
All right, and just before I move off this slide, I just want to go back to site distance real quick, just to acknowledge that there are two conditions of approval identified in the staff report. So staff identified it as feasible that the applicant could comply with the site distance. Site distance is identified and calculated in 10.32 of our code, which is a clear and objective standard. And so we have conditions of approval 25B and 41 that require applicant to show site distance before construction, after construction is done, and then on through time as well. All right, next issue is parking. So there is a concern about there not being sufficient parking for the site. The code does provide clear and objective standards for our minimum and our maximum parking. So minimum is 1 per unit and maximum is 2.5. And so applicants just have to fall somewhere between those two. And the applicant has proposed parking, including garages and driveways that are at least meeting our parking dimensions, as well as drive aisles. So back to the drive aisle thing, those would be those stalls that you see where on the private road, not the public road. There's an additional 31 parking stalls on the public road that could be counted towards off-site parking for multifamily, but in this case, we're not.
And by public street, do you mean Mountain View Street or Holmes Lane?
Through the middle of the site with the street extension.
I thought you said that was a private street, not a public street.
The thing that looks like the letter F, with the thing at the bottom, that's all private streets. The main roadway is a public right-of-way.
Okay.
So the parking along that, where the arrow is now, is not counted towards off-street parking, though this development could count it towards off-street parking if they wanted to.
Is that where you're running the little cursor?
Yeah, the up and down north longest street that there is that connects Mountain View.
Along the extension of Rylance.
Yep. Correct. And then, let's see. Because, we'll talk about it in a second, but because there's conditions of approval that will require some slight tweaks to the site plan, mainly some additional landscape buffer on the right-hand side of the screen, the conditions of approval anticipate that maybe some parking might change, and it acknowledges that and allows for that change to occur, provided that it still retains between the minimum and maximum. So for example, we don't know if parking will get reduced, but if they want to lose some of that drive aisle parking, for example, to gain some width, that can happen.
Can you put the cursor where you're talking about?
The parking in the drive aisle on the very left-hand side, north, go up, go to the right a little bit, right there, as an example.
Okay.
That's a drive aisle. They have more than the minimum of parking. If they need to lose some of that, they can. I don't know if they are going to or not. Also, our minimum and maximum are designed to accommodate parking on site. And so people may park in the neighborhood and around in other public places where they are allowed to park, and there is no prohibitions against parking on a street down the block or whatnot. They're allowed to park. The assumptions in our code with the clear and objective standards are that we accommodate sufficient parking on site. There were comments also about parking in Stafford Park. If they want to park in the park, then they would need city approval to park in a park, and they would also need to go through a parking agreement as well. That's not proposed in this case, but there were concerns identified about that.
Could you say that again?
There were concerns.
There was an assumption that people were going to park in Stafford Park?
Correct.
I thought there were bollards in front of, so you can't drive into the park.
In the parking lot of the park.
The parking lot of the park. Oh.
To support this development. It is not proposed in this application. If they wanted to do that, they would have to seek further approval from the city, which is not part of this proceeding.
Is that on the Mountain View side or is that on the Holmes side? The Mountain View side?
Then the last concern, so to Mountain View, yes. The last concern was about parking in fire aisles, and there's a condition of approval number 7 that will allow the fire department to take a look at that, and they'll be able to restrict parking in locations where there isn't sufficient space to serve the site. The next one is about Stafford Park and historic resource protections. So there was a comment about a contribution to Stafford Park. There is no criteria in our code that requires contribution to Stafford Park. There's a section in the staff report where it acknowledges that the applicant had maybe thought about identifying a contribution of some type to Stafford Park and explicitly identified that as not an approval criteria at all. So it is not a requirement that they contribute, nor a condition of approval. The next one is historic impacts of development. There were comments about the impact of the proposal as it relates to historic structures and locations or in the vicinity. The subject site itself is not in a historic district, nor does it include individually designated structures outside of a historic district. So there are no provisions for us to do any historic review at all. And landscaping and trees. So coming back to this landscaping thing, there was comments about errors in the tree survey, as you read in the staff report. The staff report acknowledged that we did have a disconnect between what we saw on paper in the tree survey and what we see on site. And there was a condition of approval to revise the tree plan. Trees are regulated through Chapter 1741 of our code, and how that code works is you can remove a tree. If you remove a tree, you have to mitigate by planting additional trees. It does not allow the city to preclude removal of a tree. It just tells you what the penalty is if you do that. And so conditions of approval related to the tree survey say, figure out what trees you're removing and make sure that we have our appropriate mitigation as identified. Then there are comments about landscape buffers. There's 2 in particular. One is the landscape buffer with the park. So on the map, on the very right-hand side, there you can see the park property. So to the right, yep, right there is the park. And so there's a condition of approval that requires a 5-foot landscape buffer with plantings between the subject site and the park. And then there's another condition of approval related to a 10-foot buffer that is required between the subject site and the adjacent zone residential property, which is that little property, not little, it is the large property south of the park right there, that little piece of the frontage. So that will have to be a 10-foot buffer also planted with plants that are identified in a clear and objective manner. Yes. There is no criteria in the code that requires a fence. The landscaping buffers, as conditioned, require the same as parking lot landscaping standards, which is a shrub every 4 feet, a tree every 35 feet, and ground cover.
Going to be maintained in terms of, I mean, I like I see that they have I'm getting close here, sorry. I see that there's a pedestrian path that's going to provide access to the park, but what about the rest of the area there? I can't tell from this plan. Is there going to be a way to restrict access except for that pedestrian path?
There is no requirement to restrict access. There is a condition of approval that if they want to build a fence, it has to comply with our fence standards, which are clear and objective. But there is no requirement that they have to build a fence.
Okay, well, it's something I'll put on the list. Thank you.
Yeah, I cannot identify a nexus to an approval criteria which would require us to make them build a fence, but they can always build a fence if they want to as well. Also, with the required plantings, the 5-foot between the park and the 10-foot between the adjacent property, in the conditions of approval, we encourage retention of existing trees, but again, we cannot require that existing trees be maintained.
Why not?
What's that?
Why not?
Our code does not provide the authority for us to not remove a tree.
If the trees are along the property line, is that carte blanche to just take them out?
In our development code, you can take out, in a case like this, you can take out whatever tree you want. The only thing that staff is really authorized to review is how many trees you have to replant.
Okay, well, my concern is about trees that would be adjacent to Stafford Park. We don't have a lot of developments that we are doing in Oregon City that are adjacent to parks.
That's correct. We just don't have a criteria that says if you're near a park.
I would hate to see trees being unnecessarily removed that are right adjacent or on the property line to the park, because to me, that's part of the park.
Yeah, we try to encourage retention of the trees by acknowledging that there has to be a landscape buffer. What better, why remove a tree and plant a new one, right? So we try to encourage retention of existing trees in that case.
I just want to make sure that Stafford Park is protected, but also there is access. So it's just not, because I could just see coming out of your driveway and everybody is tromping through the landscaping and there you go. And that's not occurring now. I mean, people access the park from different places. It's just, I like the idea that we have a landscape buffer, because I believe all of that zoned R6, including the park?
The residential piece that is...
Yes, is the Stafford house.
Is zoned R6. I think the park is institutional. I'll have to double check that give me 1 second, I can figure that out.
It's a park, so that, I have a concern about that.
Yeah. Okay. So that is my summary of the issues associated with the Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association that were brought up below. High level, if you have any questions, let me know. If not, I will pass it back to Ms. Richter to talk about the other second appeal.
The applicant has a separate appeal filed, and the focus of that appeal is with respect to condition of approval number 3, which requires frontage improvements along the full length of Holmes Lane. That's right-of-way, sidewalk, bicycles. They have also raised concerns with respect to other conditions of approval not being clear and objective, and the staff report provides alternative language that we think addresses those concerns. The issue with respect to condition 3 is it provides the development shall provide the following along the development's frontage of Holmes Lane. The applicant's position is that development is the piece where housing is proposed, and the Community Development Director's decision assumes that the development is the area that is the subject to change, to a material change. And here in addition to a lot line adjustment, we have removal of an accessory structure, and we have some new housing proposed in the area where there is no housing now. So it is the staff's position that the entire property is the development. And so it is appropriate under table 1612-016, which sets forth the minimum street requirements by category of what must be included, and that includes a landscape strip, it includes a bicycle lane, and it includes a sidewalk. The applicant sought a modification to reduce those slightly, but they are all there in the proposal, but only with respect to what they're calling the development lot, the piece where the new housing will be located after the lot line is adjusted. Whether or not the applicant could have filed an application for a lot line adjustment separately and gotten it, and then filed a development application as a way to avoid this problem, they had that choice. They did not pursue that choice, and they filed an application to develop both lots. And under our code, the table requires improvements in front of, with respect to all development. And so the city's position is that the staff's position is that that encumbers both parcels, 545 Holmes Lane as well. One of the things that the applicant has claimed is that the city has failed to identify the specific impact of the project that would be substantially impeded, the government interest that would be substantially impeded by not requiring sidewalks and bicycle lanes. And what I would point out is that this development is for 60 homes. And those 60 families and children will need sidewalks in order to access Stafford Park. They will need sidewalks to safely access the Molalla commercial area. And as I think the Neighborhood Association raised, in order to safely access school bus stops. So, and there is testimony by Mr. Repplinger that the enhanced sidewalks and bicycle lanes will increase safety. And so that is where I think we find the essential nexus for requiring sidewalks and bicycle lanes the full length of the development frontage. I'm not going to go through these. So that's the thrust of the condition number 3. Staff has provided before the commission some revisions to the other conditions that are set forth here. And I won't read them, but I'm happy to talk about any of them if the commission has any questions. At this point, I will close the staff report, and we can talk about the options the commission has, but probably more helpful at the end after taking testimony. Happy to answer any questions.
I would love to ask a question after you.
Yeah, so just real quickly, the previous slide where you said, I believe you said you've provided modified language Is that the modified language? And so that would carry forward in any final findings, or has this been provided to the applicant?
So these are the modified conditions that were set forth in the staff report. If the commission doesn't have any concerns with any of them, then the motion that you adopt would include these modified conditions.
So we don't know at this point, prior to hearing from the applicant, whether or not they like this.
The applicant did submit a letter, I think on Monday, there have been a few, but on Monday, raising their concerns with condition number 3, and they didn't mention these, so I interpreted that to mean that they were okay with them, but I think we may hear tonight whether they're not.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure I understand where we're at in the process. I'm sure they'll probably address that in their 15 minutes. Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, it's my understanding that the city has long-standing policies regarding what is considered development, and I guess my question involves that if a lot line adjustment had been submitted ahead of time before the development, I think what I understand, the way the staff looks at it, is that they would have looked at the lot line adjustment from the standpoint of the fact that the property has future potential development. Same thing that the city has done when we've seen partitions that could lead to further development in terms of a subdivision. So to me, this doesn't really seem any different than what the city has done in the past and what applications we have seen, because the configuration of that lot after a lot line adjustment looks to me like there would be opportunity for future development, which is, I mean, I agree with what you have stated. It's just, it's not something you guys made up. This is something that the city does routinely, and they looking at the bigger picture. So this is, my understanding is this is a bigger picture look.
We do have definitions in our code that help us identify how we got to full improvements along the subject site. We do not require public improvements with just a lot line adjustment. Our code doesn't authorize that. Minor partition, a little bit different of a thing.
What I'm thinking you might be thinking about is a planned unit development or a master plan where we sort of shadow plat, sort of future development. But I mean, for purposes of, the code does define the term development.
Yes.
And I can read it if you want, but it talks about making a material change in the use or appearance of land.
Yeah, and that's this. Then the other question I have is that I'm going back a few years ago, and wasn't this area subject to a sewer moratorium because there was capacity issues, I recall? Is that, am I remembering that correctly, Mr. Lewis?
I don't think that's in the
This entire area. I mean, it has to do with the sewer and the sanitary and all of that, because that's, I think people wanted to develop earlier, but
So that question's not in the record.
no, but it has to do with the sanitary. And there was a question in here about connections, but we have adequate facilities now.
The record reflects that the staff analysis is that the facilities are adequate
Okay.
to serve this development.
Okay. All right, so I'm looking to the commission at this point and looking at the clock. It is 9:45. We have commission policy that at 10 p.m. we have to decide if we're continuing past 10 p.m. and before we start this round of public testimony, I kind of want to get a read on the commission of what's your pleasure on, if we start the public testimony, I kind of feel like we need to probably get through the public testimony piece tonight, which will clearly take us at least till 10:30, maybe even 10:40. Somewhere in there. We do have at least 2 commission business items that, well, we have at least one that I know needs to be taking place tonight. We can punt the others to another meeting. So just general consensus from the commission, since we're at a break point, I assume we want to continue past 10, but I would love to hear from you as far as where you would prefer our stopping point to be, knowing that we're going to be pushing our time. Any thoughts on that?
Of course. With all due respect to everyone that is here tonight, I knew that the staff report and the challenges to the statements and all the other documentation we have, I knew this was going to take a considerable amount of time, and I'm still trying to get some of the stuff straight in my head. I've got a couple of memos I've got to reread personally. I would not support going past our time. I think we want to come back and start fresh with all the testimony after having looked at all this stuff again. And again, I apologize because you've sat here and listened to it, but we had to go through all these procedural issues. And I believe the attorney has asked us to make a decision about where you had the little orange, where did that go, Jacob? That was just here a minute ago. Rise conditions. So I think one of them, which one's the lot line adjustment? One.
BH&A.
Is that the 04 or is that the 05?
04.
Okay. That may be simpler. I think the larger one is, I would strongly recommend waiting.
Well, they're grouped together.
I know.
And so we're going to do, I feel like if we do the public testimony, I feel like we need to commit to it either tonight or we know we're going to continue this. We're not going to make, I don't think we're going to make a decision tonight on this.
I support doing a continuance. I just don't think I can make a decision because there's just so many issues and I need to go back and review the staff report again. I thought I had it straight in my head and Ms. Richter clarified several things that I need to go back and
No, I agree with you. The only question is whether or not we hear testimony tonight or if we hear it next time. I know we have a bunch of people here who've been waiting.
I know, that's why I said, that's why I apologize for even making
Morrow,
the statement.
Do you have any comments, thoughts?
I agree with Commissioner McGriff. I would like to look at this with the, with a new day when we're a little more level-headed coming into this new. So.
And okay, Commissioner Smith.
I think we need to listen to the public that showed up to the meeting tonight. And I'm willing to do that. I think it's, we could have definitely made that decision early on and said we weren't going to take public testimony, but most people have been sitting in the audience all night waiting for this. We have an hour or more or whatever. I think we should do it. We aren't going to make a decision, obviously, but we need to listen to the public that showed up tonight.
Okay, I have one clarifying question, then Mr. Conkle, I'll come to you. If we go through as much of the public testimony portion as we can tonight and it continues, what about the next meeting? Would we need to make a decision on closing that portion of the public hearing or would public testimony still be allowed at the next?
It's up to the commission. It's up to the commission whether or not you wanted to close, get through the public testimony tonight and then close the record.
Or we can leave it open.
Or you can leave it open and we can reconvene and hear from anybody who comes next time. It's up to the commission how you want to do it. The key is no new evidence and only those people who testified before.
Right, okay.
But if we continued it and continued testimony would still be based on what you just said. That's my understanding.
Yes. Mr. Conkle.
I was just going to say, so, the commission can decide by consensus to go past 10 o'clock or somebody can make a motion either way and vote on it. So that's up to the commission on how to proceed. But we do have a hard stop at 11.
Okay. Why are you standing?
Because it's time to stand up and I'm getting a cramp in my leg.
Time to stretch.
Sorry, yes. So they can actually see me better and hear me better. So it's like, I just have to stand up. My leg's falling asleep.
All right. I agree with Commissioner Smith. I would like to hear from the folks. They've been waiting a long time and I would like to hear from them, but we're kind of at a 2-2 and I think we can, I don't know how we move forward at this point.
Well, we'd have to agree to a hard stop so that we can get through the other item. we have that one item that we have to get done tonight. We have no choice with the resolution. So if we set a hard stop at 10:45 and then go to 11, or do you want to say 10:30 and then we do that item and then we're done and continue
I think what makes sense is you either take, you take all the public testimony, we're going to hear from the applicant, then you take all the public testimony and you either continue it before the rebuttal or after the rebuttal. And you can make that decision at the time, if that makes sense to you.
Yes, it makes sense.
I'd like to make a motion that we continue beyond 10 o'clock and start with the public testimony.
I would second your motion, but you have to have a hard stop for the item involving the resolution, so we can get that done tonight as well.
So I know we have a bunch of folks in the audience, and unfortunately, our process is it's not a free-for-all. I know you're there. You can't all just stand up and make public comment, and this is it's difficult for us. I understand it's difficult for you as well. So right now we have a motion on the table to continue public testimony. And Commissioner McGriff, you asked for a hard stop.
So we can get through the resolution on the water rate.
Right.
So if we can get through everything and not get into rebuttal, I'm supporting Commissioner Smith's motion so that we know that we have at least 5-10 minutes to deal with that water rate resolution, whatever time that is, so.
Right, okay. Commissioner Smith, do you agree with that second?
Yes, I'm just worried if we keep discussing this more, we're going to run out of time, so we got to get going.
Yeah. So he's made the motion to continue past 10 p.m. That needs to happen regardless, and we will have a hard stop. We're going to have a hard stop on this item at 10:30 because we do have other business we need to do. All right, call the roll.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
No.
Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so we made it past that procedural hurdle, barely. All right, so we're going to start with public testimony. And for those who are in the audience, we're going to try to move as fast as we can. This is clearly going to be continued to the next meeting. So if you do not want to stay, you do not have to stay. It's up to you. Mr. Conkle.
But there potentially will not be public testimony.
Yeah, there's.
Depending on how we get at 10:30. We'll see where we're at. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's potentially no public testimony, but anyway. All right, we're going to start with the applicant, the appellant, BH&A. You have 15 minutes.
No, we're going to start with the applicant.
Sorry, that's not what my list says.
Sorry.
Is that wrong on the thing there then?
I have 3 stacks of public comment forms, but.
Well, I mean, if the commission wants to start with BH&A, that's fine. That's fine.
I'd start with the applicant if it was up to me.
The key is going to be that the applicant gets rebuttal because they bear the burden of proof, but it doesn't matter so much which appellant goes first. I had assumed that the appellant applicant would go first because then BH&A would go next and then the applicant would go with rebuttal.
I support that. That makes sense to me. It's a logical progression.
Okay. Yeah, I'm following my notes that were given to me. So we are starting with the applicant. I have Garrett Stevenson and a whole bunch of other folks that are with you. They're welcome to join you. I have Garrett Stevenson, Neil Fernando, Steve Miller, Scott Miller. All right, Dana Beckwith. I think that's everybody.
You can all sit up there.
So you have 15 minutes. y'all can swap out seats however you want to do it in your 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me, I share the public and the commission's concern about the late hour, and I'm going to try and do my best to get through this in something that makes sense. So I think what I want to do, based on what I've heard tonight, is start out, because I understand we've only got 15 minutes to not only talk about our own appeal, but also anticipate some of the issues that may come up in BHNA's appeal. So I think it would aid the commission if I go ahead and zip through, so to speak, our appeal, which is really a technical legal issue, for a few minutes. And then what I wanted to do, out of respect to the commission, but also, you know, because we do actually take neighborhood concerns seriously, is I have up here with me Steve Miller to my left and Neil Fernando to my right, with Amerio Design, and Dana Beckwith, who's behind me, who is our traffic engineer. And also I've got Scott Miller, who's representing the developer. And what I wanted to do is give an opportunity for these folks to talk a little about the project itself and address some of the concerns we know we've seen from the neighborhood. So before I do that, I regretfully, and I know I'm going to owe Commissioner McGriff an apologetic email at some point, but I want to reiterate my objection to her further participation in the matter because of her observations, and I believe it was about taking care of the Holmes house, as well as extra record evidence offered by Commissioner McGriff. We believe that, along with her membership in, I believe it is, forgive me for a moment, her involvement in McLaughlin House, and also some of the comments we've heard tonight raises, I think, a reasonable suspicion on our part that she's not able to make an unbiased decision and may have prejudged the application. So I want to reiterate that based on what we heard in the interim. But now, with that out of the way, we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about Condition 3. Condition 3 is merely a very narrow issue on appeal, and essentially it's this. You have the development site, and the vast majority of it is fronting Holmes Lane. And that development is addressed as 535 Holmes Lane only. We understand the staff is interpreting Condition 3 to require frontage improvements as well on 545 Holmes Lane. Now, our grounds for this appeal are explained in more detail in our appeal statement August 5 and reiterated again on August 31st. But stated simply, 545 Holmes Lane is owned by Christopher Streeter, who has agreed to sell the applicant some property. The property that he's selling the applicant is going to have frontage improvements along it. So it's not a question of there's been a property line adjustment and we are not actually addressing the property that has been adjusted into the project. We are, and we have no problem with that. The problem we have is frontage improvements along Mr. Streeter's remaining property. It's his existing house and his yard. Presumably, it's been the way it is for a long time. And we challenged this on a number of grounds, but I wanted to iterate, at least orally, our Fifth Amendment grounds, because we're obligated to do that under state law. Under Nolan v. California Coastal Commission, city is required to identify an essential nexus between a governmental interest and the condition of approval. And in Oregon, the Court of Appeals has said that's not enough just for the city to simply have a policy requiring frontage improvements. It has to demonstrate that the improvements are necessary to accommodate an impact. That's Hill v. City of Portland. It's a 2018 Court of Appeals case. In this instance, there's simply no debate that Mr. Streeter's home will remain and is not being redeveloped. If and when it is redeveloped, it will have to provide frontage improvements, but it's not now. It's going to generate the same number of vehicle and pedestrian trips as it did before. Therefore, there's just simply no actual impact on the city's street system that requires frontage improvements on 545 Holmes Lane. You heard Mr. Replinger earlier say that the street system is adequate to serve the proposed development. And the other thing I would like to highlight for you in response to Attorney Richter's comments is that there are already interior pathways going to both parks on either side of the project. So it's just simply not right in our view to suggest that the frontage improvements are necessary to get folks from this project into the parks. They can do that actually in a much safer way, in a sense, through their own, through this, proposed development. So in addition to the required nexus, the city has the burden to demonstrate that the condition is roughly proportional to the impact it's trying to address. That's under Dolan v. City of Tigard. I'm sure you guys have heard that a number of times. It's a very famous case. But in this instance, since there's no development proposed whatsoever on what remains of 545 Holmes Lane, we don't believe that the city can demonstrate that there's any rough proportionality here. And to my knowledge, there's nothing in the record attempting to demonstrate proportionality. Ms. Richter attempted to identify a nexus, but there was no discussion that I saw about proportionality. And what that would be is, hey, you're going to impact the street system in this way, and we think it's reasonable to request that you spend $80,000 or however much it costs to do these additional street improvements onto property owned by somebody else. So that's really the long and the short of the constitutional issues we bring up here. The only thing I would add is I don't think that the Constitution really cares whether the whether the lot line adjustment was done before the application for the multifamily development came in or after. What the Constitution cares about is whether the condition has the required nexus and is roughly proportional. And we don't think either of those showings has been made in this case, and it is the burden of the city to make those showings. And with all of that, I just want to explain that the applicant reserves all of its rights under ORS 197-796 to challenge a condition in circuit court or LUBA if frontage improvements are ultimately required here. So with that legal stuff out of the way, I would like to hand things over to what I hope will be a more interesting discussion to the commission. I guess I'll start with you, Steve, and then Neil and Dana are here to address any traffic questions you have. And what I think I'd like to have Steve talk about is, and Neil, feel free to jump in anytime, but talk about some of the concerns we've heard from the neighborhood about storm water management, storm drainage, erosion control, and that sort of thing. So with that, I will hand it over to Steve.
Yeah, well, since we're going to go to stormwater, I think I'll punt to Neil. He is our engineer here for that conversation tonight.
Good evening, Mayor and the Commissioners. My name is Neil Fernando with Imario Design, 644 Southwest Fallbrook Place, Suite 100, Beaverton, Oregon, 97008. I am a registered engineer with the state of Oregon, and I'm going to briefly touch on grading, stormwater, and erosion control. If you look at the site today, all the drainage goes towards the northwest corner and then eventually to the canyon behind. The way we have designed this is to maintain that same storm pathway, if I may say. And we have designed a facility to take care of the stormwater. Every drop of stormwater that falls on this site is conveyed through the piping, manholes, catch basins, except for, I believe, for like 4,000 square feet out of 158,000, which is less than 1%, is not caught and brought into this stormwater facility through the piping system, the conveyance system that we have designed. And we have put this facility as close as possible to the northwest corner where the stormwater was going anyway. And the stormwater facility, it's a twofold facility. It takes care of the detention requirements and also the water quality requirements. Detention is basically we are storing the water during a storm event and releasing it slowly back into where it needs to go, just like what it is today, which is called the pre-flow. And the water quality is basically we are cleaning the water, scrubbing it down before it goes out of our site. So those two things are accomplished from the stormwater facility. And also, I read through the comments, and one of the things that they mentioned was the erosion control. Now, we have designed straw bales and silt fences and all that as needed to take care of the erosion control. And we are also required to get a 1200C permit from DEQ. So DEQ will have the final say of our design. It's not like we are just going to come up with a plan and get approval from the city. DEQ has to bless this plan as well. So we are under the scrutiny of DEQ on this project. We have designed this project to meet all the standards set forth by the city in the 2009 Oregon City Stormwater and Grading Standards. And we've worked with the staff. I must give some kudos to the staff. The staff has been wonderful to work with on the engineering side and the planning. So we've done the design based on what's out there per the city's standards. And if you look at our stormwater manual, our stormwater report we have, which is about 60-some pages, and that's the preliminary design right now. And once the planning process is done, then we'll go into final design and we'll take care of every detail beyond what we have right now. I think that's kind of the overview from my end. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you for your time.
Great, thanks, Neil. And just a point to tag on to what Neil just talked about is that we do preliminary engineering because we don't know what the final design at an engineering level is going to look like until we get through this process. As Neil mentioned, we still need to get a 1200C from DEQ. And as you go and get from 30% design level to a 100% design level, there are always small changes that need to be made, which is why the city requires a condition that we come back to it with a final stormwater design, final grading and erosion control plans. It's simply infeasible to design a project to 100% engineering detail and then go through a land use review process, then go through a DEQ process and not have a number of small changes that wouldn't necessarily matter at a planning level, but certainly matter at an engineering level. You may be moving a pipe 1 inch this way or 1 inch that way. You may be treating a surface here a little bit different than a surface there. So if, it's understandable that people would wonder, well, why isn't everything figured out now? Well, it's not figured out now because this is one of several permits that the applicant has to obtain in order to do the project. And that's why we have preliminary and final designs. The conditions of approval, which we support, with the exception of condition 3, all say you got to do your preliminary engineering designs with respect to stormwater and erosion control, and then come back and we will review and approve a final one. So I just wanted to make that clear. With that, Steve, did you want to say anything about the landscaping or trees? I know that has come up a little bit.
I can speak briefly to that. Steve Miller, Amario Design, 6445 Southwest Fallbrook Place, Suite 100, Beaverton, Oregon, 97008. I think staff has captured all that in their staff report by letting you know that there are conditions of approval, and you've probably seen them in the report saying that we do need to bring in a certified landscape plan by a landscape architect. So we're working on that. We're working on reconfiguring the site plan to comply with all the conditions of approval to get the 10-foot buffer in along that little strip of land that's zoned R6. We're also working on making sure that we have our street aligned per the tangents that they requested. We're going to give them a revised tree removal plan as they requested in a condition of approval. So I think, again, except for condition 3, as we've iterated, that it is overstepping its boundaries in terms of what is allowed to require an improvement on. We agree with the conditions of approval as they were presented to us. And so that's why we had such a narrow scope on our appeal.
Thanks, Steve. Steve Miller is the land use planner on the project. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
I saw the clock ticking, so I wanted to get it out.
So, thank you. Do you have any questions for any of us before we sit back down?
I think you have other comments.
Yeah, Scott Miller, representing the developer from Mariel Design as well. I just want to add that we went through a pre-application process with the city about over a year and a half ago, at which point the existing community development director at the time advised us to run concurrent paths with the PLA, the lot adjustment, and our land use planning. That's the only reason we went down that path versus separating it and doing one before the other, because we were advised to do it that way because it would save time, and there's no reason on a project this size that we as a developer would ever go down a different path, assuming that we could do that. So I just want to make that clear.
All right, thank you for your comments. I'm going to ask the commission, please hold your questions. They're going to come back this next time around. Right. So write down your questions. Thank you for presenting to us tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Late hour. All right, next up, we got the Barkley Hills Neighborhood Association to present your 15 minutes. Yeah, and so who we have Carla Laws, James Donnelly, and Catherine Piesowitz.
I will deliver one.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I said, you got my name right. I owe you a lollipop.
Okay.
I thought you were going first.
My name's Carla Laws. I'm Barclay Hills Neighborhood Chair. One of the key issues that I brought to my attention that I wanted to bring up before everyone else spoke was they presented to us in November of 2020. They presented us the 60-unit complex, and if you actually look at the land use, the big issue about it is the road they need to build. And they have a traffic safety report from 2017. We've gone through COVID. COVID still exists, so traffic will increase once people feel more safe, on top of Gardner's being rebuilt, so there's more room for more kids. And the bottom line is you don't have an accurate analyst of 2017 report on traffic safety, especially if you're adding in a new road. It doesn't make sense. And I'm concerned about that road and safety, and I think that's our biggest issue here on this issue, just the development itself, because that road, we don't know what it's going to impact. And they say, oh gosh, it's going to help Mountain View, but I don't believe that necessarily, and I think that needs to be studied. So that's my comment, and I'm gonna let everyone else go on. Yep.
James Donnelly, Oregon City, Oregon. I want to start off with, we are doing this now? Mm-hmm. Okay, just want to check.
Yep.
I wanted to start off with, I submitted two letters that were, one was from the Confederated Tribes and one is to the Confederated Tribes. And it's in regards to possible artifacts that are probably on that property. I called and I spoke with Mr. Christian Nauer, who is an archaeologist from the Confederated Tribes. When I called and spoke to him, he had no idea what I was talking about. He said, what letter? I've never received a letter. And I think this other letter was generated by one of his staff. I just found the third letter that you mentioned to me today. And this is from the Confederated Tribe to Oregon City. And there are all these recommendations for cultural research surveys, over and over and over again. And Oregon City never answered any of them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 recommendations for discovery plan, research survey, SHPO standards. They reiterated several times and they were never answered by Oregon City. So I'll go through that. So my thoughts are, when I bought my house, everything was R6, And it would limit the size of this development. So there's not 45-foot high, 3-story gigantic condos that are, I think they were called apartments. They're going to be apartments. I don't know what they're going to be, if they're going to be single-family homes that are owned. I'm requesting it's rezoned to R6 as it was before. And even if there is a development, a road put through, the impact would be so much less than having 60 units that are 3-bedroom, 2-bath. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of traffic. As opposed to single-family homes that would be similar to Haley Court, which is right off of Holmes Lane. That was as big as a development could go in back in previous to 2004. And Haley Court is 3-bedroom, 2-bath, small homes, 2-car garage, you know, same cookie cutter all the way down both sides of the street. That street was created around 2000, between 2001, 2004, I think. There is a huge environmental impact on this. And from what they just mentioned, they being Amerio Construction, that collection pond's going to overflow. I'm going to let you take that part of it. So that's the collection ponds. The applicant is, I don't understand this. Is the applicant is he going to put play equipment in Stafford Park?
No.
No? Okay. Okay. And the plans on the paper do not reflect a buffer zone. I don't see how that's going to work with their fire lane, that the 10-foot buffer from my property into the end of their fire lane, and then the added 5-foot buffer that is between Stafford Park. The drawings don't show anything to that effect. So the plans don't reflect a buffer zone. They don't show any movement in where the location of the future properties are going to be. And another thing that's repeated throughout the packet that I received is that the staff has determined that it's possible and likely and reasonable the applicant can meet the standards through conditions of approval. How do you know that? Have you done projects with them before? That's my big question.
Please direct your comments to the commission.
Oh,
they're the
okay,
ones making the decision tonight.
But, okay. Again, the staff has determined that, and again, it's what staff member determined this based on what documentation. There's no documentation showed that on any of these subjects over and over and over again in the packet that we received on many subjects, that it's an opinion of one staff member, and are they qualified for that department? That's my other question. If you'd like, would you like to take the mic for that?
Okay, thank you. All right, I know we're specifically going to talk about the things that were entered into the appeal. And Jim has a lot of points here, but I never received any notification of any kind. There's a document, you should have it, sent January of 2020 by the representative of the developer announcing a meeting to discuss this. We never got it. Everybody I have talked to I live on Cedar Lane. Everybody that I've spoken with, all my neighbors on Cedar Lane, they never got it. I have talked to people on Holmes Lane, etc. It never was mailed. Just because the letter appears in the file for this project does not mean it was ever mailed. Second, the representative of the developer, we'd already talked about this, approached the Berkeley Hills Association to attend the November meeting. The normal way to notify of a Berkeley Hills Association meeting is a postcard mailed. We never received that postcard. And in addition to that, and I've spoken with several of my neighbors who also, and other people on Holmes Lane, who never received that notification. Now, their justification for that was, well, we were having trouble with our mail. They said the same thing about the May meeting. We were having trouble with the mail. Yes, there were things on Facebook, there were things posted, but that's making the assumption that everybody has a computer and everybody has internet access. That is a faulty assumption. I have a neighbor on Holmes Lane who has lived in her home for 60 years. She does not own a computer. She never has. She does not have internet connection. When she wants to access something on the internet, do email, she relies on the library to do that. In 2020, the library was closed. So I'm just saying, the developer had an obligation under the city codes and the laws to notify the people in that area that this development concerned. They did not do their due diligence. All right, now I want to talk very specifically about two things. One of them, they already have talked about their storm report. I read the storm report. I never got notification in time to make any comments on this. We never received any notification, May 10th or the one that was sent on May, I think it was the 21st, never came to us, as well as some of my neighbors, by the way. So I didn't know about this until July at the association meeting. At that time, I learned I had no rights to appeal, but other people did. So I offered to help with some of the research. I dug in, that was my first dive into the project files. I found the stormwater report. I read it thoroughly, and trust me, that's a challenge. It's real thick. What I found in there was the assumption that I understand the whole concept about they call it a pond, but it's a catch basin. I understand that, and it's real common use for stormwater containment. But they're making an assumption that all of the stormwater falling on this site is going to travel to that catch basin. If you look at the contour map for the site, that's an erroneous assumption. They called them private streets. Somewhere in the last couple of weeks, they've been changed to driveways. Drives or something? Yeah. So you've got this pavement. They're putting a road through here. The road goes on the side of most of the development. The catch basin is over here. The road comes over here. Water always runs downhill. Water always takes the course of least resistance. Stormwater, rain that comes down, that lands on flat paved surfaces, will take the course of least resistance. That means all that stormwater is going out onto Mountain View. Mountain View does not even have a storm drain at that location on Mountain View. In addition, where this roadway comes out onto Mountain View, if you look at a map, Mountain View goes from east to west, and then it curves. And it curves, and when it curves, Mountain View is a lot narrower than it looks on the map. But where it curves, it narrows down the roadway even more, and it's a very steep hill, and it goes directly into Singer Creek and directly into one of the streams that feeds into Singer Creek. There's been very little mention of the extension of Singer Creek Park. There's a Singer Creek Park extends right along the north, I get all confused.
West side.
Yeah, the west side. There's a part of Singer Creek Park that extends along the entire west side of this site. They don't mention that. The city parks department has intentionally only improved a small area off of Lynn for public access and use of that park, because they know that having an appropriate reptilian corridor is vital to filtering water before it gets into the stream systems.
Ms. Piesowitz, you're out of time. You've used your time for the
So I think that the storm and the potential historical site needs to be addressed before this development can get started. And they haven't been, and the developers haven't addressed them.
All right, so you will have a chance to come back in the rebuttal and at the next meeting. So thank you for continuing to participate tonight.
Thank you. Will we have a chance to rebuttal what
Yes.
the developers
I'm about to cover that. So thank you for participating, though, with the neighborhood association. All right, so moving forward, so we are at our 10:30 time. Our process that we normally follow with our public hearings is that we would continue with other opportunity for testimony. So that would be 3 minutes for individuals. If you'll remember earlier this evening, we covered the whole list of individuals who had standing. We talked about the neighborhood association. All of those folks have the ability to come back and continue with your public testimony. And of course, there's 5 minutes for the appellant, and there's 5 minutes for the applicant to provide rebuttal statements before the commission will make a decision. So I believe tonight, at this point, we just need a motion to continue this public hearing to our next meeting. I was wondering, what's the date certain on that? It would be the
September 15th at 7 p.m. in this room.
I was trying to find my code citations. Move that we continue SP 210001, LL 21-002, and the accompanying appeal numbers, which I don't have in front of me, so to the 15th of September.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Wiley?
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Right, and so I believe these folks could also submit written testimony if they don't want to be here or aren't able to participate.
Yes, provided they have standing and
If they were on
no
that
new
list,
issues.
yes. Is there anything else from staff on this item? No, okay. All right, well, moving on the agenda, thank you all for participating this evening. I know it was a very long meeting. We do have a couple things we need to do that are time sensitive. And with that, we talked about general business. We have a water ballot measure. Mr. Conkle.
Thank you, Mayor, evening commissioners. So as you're aware, the City Commission passed two resolutions, one addressing the amount of debt to take on related to a water ballot, a water measure. Would you like me to hold for a second?
Can you pause 1 second?
Yeah.
Can you all please have your conversations outside?
John will help.
Thank you. We're trying to continue our meeting real quick. Okay.
Thank you. So the commission passed two resolutions as it relates to the water ballot measures that are being proposed for the November election. The first one dealt with taking on additional debt, and the second one was dealing with authorizing a temporary water rate increase above the 3% annual charter limit. The resolution concerning the additional 3% above the charter limit was challenged at Circuit Court. So tonight, the judge issued a decision this morning related to the Oregon City ballot measure language and a revised order from Judge Wetzel in response. And before the commission tonight, when the judge issued his decision, there were certain parts of the ballot measure language in the caption, the question, and the summary that are required to be included in the ballot when it goes to Clackamas County. The judge did offer the commission to make a decision related to two options. One is related to the question, and so there's a question posed: may the city increase water rates up to an additional 3% annually over charter limit for 6 years for water system improvements? And the judge added annually and gave the commission the option to remove charter or water. So that's the one decision. And then the second is in the summary, the city goals, which will require additional or further action by the city commission. And so the commission will need to provide a direction whether they would prefer additional or further. So once again, two decisions tonight can be made in one motion. Which question would we like? Removing water or removing charter? And which word would we like? Additional or further? I'd be happy to answer any questions, help clarify that a little more.
Commissioners? Comments?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Yep,
Okay.
let's do it.
I move that the commission choose the first version of the question and use the word additional in the summary, and otherwise consistent with the court's order, the city elections officer shall provide the amended ballot title to the county elections office to be used in the voter's pamphlet.
Okay, what about the other one?
That addresses both of them.
He addressed it both.
So we're approving the first question, which will remove the word charter, and we're using the word additional.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Wiley?
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. The other item that we had moved off the consent agenda was work session minutes, and I believe Commissioner Marl, you had an edit that we needed to make, or you requested to make.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So for under the list of future work session agenda items, I requested an edit to include my request that we look at changing the process of mayoral appointments to the Planning Commission and HRB. And that is reflected in the amended minutes before us.
Second.
All right, so just to be clear, we're talking about the draft meeting minutes from the City Commission work session from August 10th.
Yes.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Wiley?
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Aye.
And Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so the other item in general business was resolution number 21-46 regarding parklets. Obviously, we are way over on time tonight, and I think we have time to address this. I think this will get just moved to the next meeting. Do you need a motion to move this, or we're just not? No.
I have a question. It's a clarification.
Okay.
Mr. Lewis, in the executive summary of the report, it says in 5 lines, so fees for parklets and sidewalk seating would revert back to the adopted engineering fee schedule. Well, I don't have that in front of me, and it's not in the report as to what those numbers are.
So can you follow up on this outside of this meeting?
Yeah, could you, it just needs to be in there. You'd say what the one is for private parking lots will remain at 25, but I just don't remember what that resolution says.
Okay, so if you can follow up.
So that's the only question I had, is it would clarify it.
Okay, for when this comes back to us. All right, so any communications, city manager?
No, not tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioners, any communications?
I have a quick one. You all received an email from City Manager Conkle regarding downtown business concerns, and I would like to discuss with the commission at a future date as soon as possible actions that the commission could take regarding statements that we could make and actions we could take with regard to being supportive of those businesses and our community.
Are you asking for that to be put on our list of future work session topics?
No, I'm asking for this to be moved up because this is happening right now, as it was explained in Mr. Conkle's memo. So I'd like to get it on a discussion for as soon as possible, because the longer we wait, the more it's continuing to happen, unfortunately. Issues concerning mask wearing, harassment of businesses, you name it, bad language, bad behavior, it just runs the gambit.
So Mr. Conkle, do you know offhand what's on the schedule for our work session next week? Like how packed it is, or Jacob, you may know.
I did an hour ago.
Tony, I think there was 2 items, and one of them I wasn't going to.
John knows because they're his, obviously.
Yeah, no, we have a joint work session with the Planning Commission to go over House Bill 2001 and a housing needs analysis. We were going to bring the Park Place urbanization study. That unfortunately it sounds like it's going to drop. So we could potentially fit that in.
I apologize, but this is important and this is happening now. And I really feel strong that the City Commission needs to, we're not ahead of it, but we can join with the other organizations to be in concert with each other about this.
Okay, so it sounds like we have room for the next work session that we could have a discussion, a City Commission discussion on that topic.
I always wish we weren't having to talk about it, to be honest with you, but it's the reality of what's happening now.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other communications from the commission? All right, seeing none. Communications from the mayor. I guess the one thing that I would like to mention that I think is timely is the Willamette Falls Legacy Project partners met in a really pivotal meeting to discuss the path forward and the inclusion of the tribes at the table of the partners in the decision making. So this was really a monumental decision, a change to the structure to try to include all 5 tribes at the table, and how do we work out the details on that. So that generally received consensus. We haven't figured out all the details. That still has to be worked out. There's lots of conversations about how that's going to work contractually, and some of those details are still there, or still need to work out, and Metro is in the lead on leading that topic. I know it's late, so Commissioner Conkle, it's late and my tongue's getting tied. Do you have anything else to add on that? You were at the meeting. Did I characterize it correctly without going into too much detail?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I think you characterized it correctly, that we're going to start reaching out to work with all 5 tribes to figure out what type of a partnership or another form that can take as we move forward with the next steps on that project for the Riverwalk.
But you said 5, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
It's all 5 tribes.
Yes.
Yes, that is a key item.
And everybody agreed that we could start this?
Yes, so there was consensus that we would try to figure out what that was going to look like and how all 5 tribes would be recognized or represented at the decision table, along with the 4 existing government partners that have been part of the decision-making. What was not worked out was the relationship with the trust and their representation with the tribes and how they fit. So I know there were some questions about the city commission and our relationship with the trust and what that will look like going forward. So I think we'll figure that out as time goes by and we figure out this moving forward. So anyway, it was a really monumental decision. So you may hear about it or folks may ask about it, and we're trying to be as inclusive as possible to include all the tribes in that project. So I thought that was important to let you know. And with that, that's all I have for this evening. So thank you all for a very, very long evening, and this meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.